Hello everybody, it's Jay and Andy again with a very special episode of the Rating Room Extra. We're calling this one Getting Under the Skin of Some Classic Clones. Some play on words there. Now in this month's special, we're going to talk about some classic and maybe not so classic remakes from the world of cinema and TV. But before we do that, Jay, I'm going to bring back the sounds of the Rating Room. So the Christmas playlist has been archived for the next 10 or 11 months or whatever it is. So why don't you tell the listeners what you've been listening to these days?
It's funny you mentioned about Christmas music, Andy, because I'm still humming the occasional Christmas jingle at home. So we're recording this middle of January and I've still got some Christmas tunes in my head. But in terms of the music I've been listening to, I've been listening to some newly discovered music as well. But also I found I've been gravitating to some of my older playlists as well. So it's very mix of genres. So I've got into Scandinavian folk music, which sounds really random, but it's really nice and chilled. And I'm not even going to try to pronounce the names of these acts, Andy. You know what I'm like with saying names. So there are some really good bands there and musicians. Other than that, like I said, I've been gravitating to my older music. And I don't mean old like as in Elvis Presley, just stuff that have come out in the last few years. So bands like This Will Destroy You, Maybe She Will, Beneath the Watchful Eyes, The Midnight, my favourite synthwave band. And I've been listening to my cinematic playlist because I've been really busy at work and I like listening to music and kind of classical themes, you know, songs that don't involve any singing. What about you, Andy?
So I posed the question and I've not really got much of an answer for you, so it's a bit of a one-sided discussion this is. So a couple of things have been released in recent days and weeks. One is the new album from Green Day, Saviors. Big fan of Green Day. They've got loads and loads of good albums over the years. So I may have mentioned this before, but I tend to listen to new material from old bands as opposed to seek out new bands. Because, you know, I'm at that age now where everything is crap and, you know, it's never as good as the old days. I'm becoming a miserable middle-aged man. So I'm going back to my youth, but updated with some new stuff. And a couple of listens to Saviors already, and it's a decent album. So definitely recommend it for those who are Green Day fans, or maybe you've not listened to Green Day in a while and you want to check out their new stuff. Also, it's the 20th anniversary of The Reason by Hoobastank. The album and the song, the song The Reason is one of my very favourite songs of all time, maybe my absolute favourite. And the re-release has brought back some good memories of that particular album. But otherwise, the thing I've been listening to most on Spotify is my Your Songs of 2023 playlist. And yeah, I think we talked about that, didn't we, on a recent episode? But it's still some bangers on there. So I'm not really moving into 2024 yet. I'm clinging on to last year.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I was listening to quite a lot of my 2023 songs and bands, but then I was thinking that is going to influence my 2024 rap. So I've been listening to, like I said before, when you listen to bands and stuff on Spotify, they recommend some others at the bottom, and I just got into a deep hole, Andy, of this kind of like dark, stormy kind of music. That's like the playlist that Spotify recommends. And like I said, there's lots of Scandinavian folk music, but also, interestingly, quite a lot of Australian acts as well. So I don't know the Australian until I start Googling it and stuff, and you have to buy like the record all the way from Australia, which is a bit of pain in the bum. But also, Andy, I pre-ordered a number of vinyl records months and months ago. I looked at August, and they sent me an email last week to say they're dispatching them and they're coming all the way from America. And then when I checked earlier today, they're still in America. So they haven't got them in the UK yet. So I think there's 4 or 5 that are pre-ordered all at the same time. So they're all coming together. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, you certainly bring an international flavour to the Rating Room. I can't say on my bingo card for 2024, I had Jay would be listening to Scandinavian folk music as one of the items on there. So that has really thrown me for a loop.
I send you some, Andy. I don't know if it'd be your cup of tea because you like your stuff a bit more, I say, full on, a bit harder. And these are just so mellow. And it's funny because I've said it before. that my kids, because I've got music constantly playing, I will just hear them singing like certain lines from the song. So I'm kind of like brainwashing them. I think maybe I need to keep playing stuff like Latin or like Chinese, like learning the language, just so I can brainwash my kids to be a bit more cultured.
You need some songs that mention like doing chores around the house to try and get them in the habit.
Yeah, I don't know if I told you this, but I offered to give my eldest, he's 15 now, some money, like, pocket money, because I'm tired, I don't give him pocket money. And he said, what do I have to do for him? So I gave him a list of chores, and he said, how much? I said, I don't know, 5 or 10 a week. And he just looked and said, it's not worth it. So in my day, I'd be lucky to get like 20 pence or something a week in my pocket money.
How times have changed. Yes, we talk about box office adjustments. I wonder how that works in terms of pocket money adjustments. What do parents give their kids? I mean, my son's 7 and he doesn't really understand money anyway, so he doesn't get pocket money. But I wonder what the acceptable rate would be. Is it like, I don't know, is it still a £5? Is it 50 quid? Is it, what could it be?
Well, you mentioned about not really understanding the value of money yet. My daughter, who's turned 12 in November, she's been going to town now on her own with her friends, and she phoned my wife and said, can I buy this drink? And it's like, yeah, go for it. So this is a drink bottle, and it was £4.99, and it was a normal, just a drink bottle, and it was £4.99 because it's like a Japanese drink. And they were like, £4.99, you can buy a meal deal from Tesco for about that much. I can't believe it.
That is outrageous.
Just for one bottle, Andy. Just one bottle.
One bottle of drink that's, I'm assuming, non-alcoholic as well.
Yeah, non-alcoholic. It'd be fizzy, but yeah, non-alcoholic. I just couldn't believe it.
That is outrageous. This podcast's taken a turn. We're just going to be two grumpy old men moaning for hours and hours now, aren't we?
I suppose we better get on. This is the stolen question, and I suppose it's quite apt because you posed me 2 questions from memory in our very first monthly special, and now I've stolen this from you. So this is like a double stolen question.
It's a stolen question.
Stolen. So this is where I, now in this month's episode, will be posing a stolen question from the internet to my co-host Andy. Now I have a choice of 2 questions, and I think I might go with both, Andy, if you're okay with this. So there's a podcast question actually, so it's quite related. If you were arrested with no explanation, what would your friends and family assume you have done? And could you tell me, break it down as well? So what do you think your friends would think you've done? And then what would your family, so like your wife? Because they might think different things depending, they might know you slightly differently.
Yeah, I was thinking that as you were saying the question, friends and family is a different answer. So some of my friends, depending on who they are, of course, probably think it's something murderous or wholly inappropriate. I dread to think what it might be actually, but it would probably be something hugely embarrassing that they think I would do because of my sense of humour that maybe doesn't come through on the podcast because there's certain things I have to censor myself with. Yeah, they would probably think something that's not so nice. But I'm a nice guy, they'd be shocked if I was arrested for anything, I think. But in terms of my family, they would probably assume that it's something money related because they have me down as a right tight arse. They know I don't like spending money, I take exception to it because I don't mind spending money on other people, but I never spend money on myself. But yeah, people have me down as a bit of a tight arse, so it's probably something money related. I mean, even this morning, when I went downstairs, I was saying to my wife, like, what have we got plugged in? Because the smart meter's showing we've used about £3.50 of electric, and it's not even lunch yet. And that's a lot of electricity for a morning. But then I remembered I'd had the dishwasher on overnight, and we'd got the heater on in the room where there's no heating. So it's like, okay, yeah, it's fine. And it's January, so we do need the heaters on. But still, I'm looking at the smart meter and thinking, oh, this is getting a bit expensive. So they would probably assume it's something money related.
So would it be money related as in like robbing a bank, or getting arrested because you're being shortchanged in a shop and you've caused an argument.
Probably defrauding an old lady or something. That's probably what they'd assume I've done. Or I've been caught like turning the meter backwards or something like that.
Okay, very good. And I think I would be the same, not in terms of type, but I think my wife has said to me that if the police turn up at the door, she would automatically default to thinking I'd have done something wrong. Instead of like I've died in an accident or something, it would be thinking I've done something, because she's already said that to me. She said, like, I'm not going to cover for you. I'll be telling him straight away, like, I've suspected he's been like this or something like that.
My wife would probably think I've murdered somebody because we've been watching Dexter in recent weeks, of course. And there's been a few times where I've said to her, "Surprise, mother," and she's been saying, "You need to stop watching Dexter because you're turning into Dokes."
Better than turning into Dexter, I suppose. If she starts seeing you buy like plastic sheets and stuff, and clear tape, then I think she shouldn't be worried. I think that I like to make jokes because I've got like an estate car, so it's got quite a big boot. So I always say to my wife, that's like 2 or 3 bodies back there that I can get. But Andy, my other question, and it's linked to like how you did the first one. You kind of posed on me an agony aunt question. So keeping with the theme, I've got one, and I must admit this one did make me chuckle. So I'm going to say it as it was written to the agony aunt, because I'm going to say something and obviously it's not me. So I'm a 35-year-old man. My wife has a strange habit of urinating in the tea she serves guests at our home. She says it gives her a kick. Though I was shocked at first, I have started enjoying it too. In fact, I do the same when making tea for guests. I've heard that drinking urine is not harmful. Is it safe to continue doing this?
Okay, this has taken a turn. That's quite the question. So, when he says he started enjoying it too, does he mean he's been enjoying drinking the tea or urinating in the tea?
I don't know, because I think that's a bit ambiguous, because you could take it either way. I've got a feeling he means actually doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bit weird. I mean, I'm not a tea drinker myself, because it probably tastes like piss anyway. So, maybe it doesn't make a difference. That is a bit weird though, and especially for the guests at home. And I wonder, I'm assuming whatever publication this came from, that it was an anonymous question. Because can you imagine if one of the neighbours like read this and saw, hang on a minute, that's such and such from down the road, and I've been going for tea for years there. That would cause quite the argument, wouldn't it? If you need me to answer the question, is it safe to continue doing this? I don't know if it's safe or not, but it's really not morally right.
No, it's not. And it's funny because I say this to my kids quite a lot when they want a drink or they want apple juice, and then I pretend to give them like, my wee, and it's apple juice. I just like make a joke saying, it's a bit warm. But no, that's how
I have put like salt and vinegar in people's tea before when I was a kid and everything. Yeah, just to mess with them a little bit. But it's been a long time since I've done things like that. I certainly wasn't doing it as a 35-year-old man.
No, I mean, I don't know what you do, Andy, in your office, but we take in turns making drinks. So I get one woman complains about my tea making skills because she literally likes the tea bag just to be shown to the water. And every time I make hers, I just give it a proper good squeeze. So it's always strong, hoping that she'll stop asking me to make her one. But she still does, but then she moans about every time I make her one.
You see, I'm not a tea or coffee drinker, so I don't partake in that sort of thing. I don't know that anyone does that in the office for me. I think it is a bit of a free-for-all. And I have never offered to make the tea, and I've never when I've been in an office in the past and they do take it in turns, I've made sure I don't have a turn because I'm not in the round. So I don't want to be involved. And you're an adult, make your own tea.
Yeah, it's I don't drink tea. I have coffee only. But when I went through I would say healthy stage, but it wasn't healthy. It's just because I have high blood pressure, so I stopped drinking caffeine, and I had fruity tea. But I used to always say fruity bags, and people thought that was quite funny at work. I have a nice fruity bag, like strawberry, raspberry, load of different ones. But do you want to hear the response from the agony aunt?
I do, and I'm hoping it goes along the lines of, stop doing that, you're a gross pig.
It's not that straightforward, Andy. They said, I'd love to say, happens all the time, Karen. So I'm guessing, I don't know where the name Karen comes from. Maybe they just made that up.
Is that Karen or is that a Karen? A Karen.
Karen. But that would be a lie, the agony aunt replied. You are a strange, troubled woman, which is interesting because, so that person's doing the response in terms of the wife and not the man who sent it in, like the husband, isn't it? So I wonder if he's named his wife in this, like my wife, Karen, and then not giving his name.
I think this agony's not read the question properly, because that response should be, tell your wife she is a strange woman.
Yes, indeed. You are a strange, troubled woman, and though I'd normally suggest a straitjacket for the deeply disturbed, in your case, I'd worry about you developing an inappropriate relationship with the buttons used to keep you constrained. So, I don't think the agony aunt is very impressed with this, and I personally, I think this makes me doubt about going to anyone's houses, and if I ever come to your house, Andy, again, I won't be asking for any tea or coffee. It would be clear water in a glass.
I will give you a glass and tell you to go to the tap yourself. So or you can witness it being pulled. But I won't be urinating in anyone's drinks anytime soon. I say for legal reasons. Shall we move on to the crux of what we're here for today, Jay? So, this is our third special. We've talked sequels, we've talked Christmas, and something of a subject adjacent to sequels, I guess you could say. We're going to be talking remakes. Now, Jay, what do you think of remakes in general? Do you think it's lazy? Is it just a bit of a cash grab?
I think in terms of what I think, it really depends on the quality. So I'm not against a remake just because it's a remake. And also, I think another important point, Andy, is how old is the original film? I don't really want to see remakes if the film only came out in the last 5-10 years. So, for example, if the original is dated and the story needs refreshing, because of like modern technology or social kind of awareness, then I think it's fine. Give it a go. But you mentioned about a cash grab or being lazy. There are some unnecessary cash grabs or even poor imitations of the original film. However, there are some remakes that I think have become classics. So a couple that jump to mind is The Thing, brilliant Kurt Russell film, and Ocean's 11. So for me, I think Ocean's 11 is the best Oceans. I wasn't a massive big fan of the other ones. So Ocean's 11 is top tier remake, I think. But also another point, Andy, is I watch a lot of foreign language films, and I sometimes enjoy where they've been remade for a Western audience. And I do generally support these ones because if you're not aware of, say, Asian cinema or, say, Scandinavian cinema, etc., you might not be exposed to those kind of films. So I think it's quite good then, because you're exposing those audience to a wider like stories and stuff. So I'm not against remakes. What about you, Andy? Where do you sit? Do you think it's lazy, a cash grab?
It's kind of difficult to give the right answer for this. I think you make some very good points there. I think if they're adding something new, or like you said, they're updated for a more modern audience, then I think there is value in remake. I do wonder, though, whether sometimes the only reason is a commercial reason, which, is fine from a business point of view, but what does it really add to the audience? I'll give you a couple of examples. Now, I must admit, I've not seen either of these, so I can't judge their quality. But in recent years, we've had Ghostbusters, with I want to say an all-female cast, but it's not an all-female cast as it's females in the previous male main roles. And then Ocean's 8, which is the same kind of idea. I guess the reason for remaking these was that attempt of addressing gender inequality. There is that perception out there, and I think rightly so, that men get the better deal when it comes to roles. Certainly get the better deal when it comes to salary. If you read the kind of things that, the kind of money that men make in leading roles versus female make, and that's not right. I get the idea, and I don't have a problem with that. But when you're doing something like a Ghostbusters or an Ocean's 8, and it is just an obvious, here are some male roles and we're going to cast females in them, does that actually do the women any justice? Isn't it better to write and create better roles for female actors, female characters, rather than just simply making female versions of males? And I think, if memory serves, we did speak about this from a James Bond perspective back in season 1, because there's a lot of talk about should the next James Bond be a woman? And I would argue, well, no, just make somebody who's better than James Bond, and then you don't have to have that comparison, because whether it's better or not, there's always going to be that benchmark. This is what it was, and it's not quite the same. So then you're almost starting at a disadvantage. And I wonder if that's the case with Ghostbusters and Ocean's 8 to an extent. And Ocean's 8 in particular. Why is it 8 and not 11? Could they not find 11 female characters to play those roles? That just from a title point of view would suggest it's less than.
That's a good point, Andy. Ghostbusters, I have seen it, and I didn't enjoy the remake. And there's obviously been another sequel with the kid from Stranger Things. I'm trying to think his name, Mike, in there, which I think was better than the all-female version of Ghostbusters. And no, I agree with you, Andy, completely. And like you said, we touched on it with James Bond when we were talking about who should be the next James Bond. And Ocean's 8, yeah, it's not a great film for me. Like I said, I think Ocean's 11, and then maybe at a push the follow-up is good. But for those reasons, Andy, I wouldn't turn on just because they've had a female cast, or they've not so much reimagined, but kind of made it a bit more, like I said, when I said about more kind of awareness, it's kind of those, like you said, those bits around the gender side of things and the equality bits. Do you know what I mean? So like any kind of the language that might have been used in the past as well. So I can think, and we're going to talk about remakes, aren't we, a bit later on. So some of the ones that we're going to talk about later on, I think, are going to be good examples of when a remake should be made. And I'm being careful because I don't want to kind of go into the next bit really just yet.
Yeah, we'll talk some specific examples. And so far we've been talking about films. And when I think remakes, generally think films, and films is obviously the big topic of what we do here on the Rating Room. But there are some TV shows that are remakes or reboots. A few that come to mind that are particularly good, but what are some of your favourites?
So there's a few, there's two that I would say really jump out, and but I want to tell you one of them now is Battlestar Galactica. Now that's a sci-fi, and it's a reimagining TV program. So I don't know if you're familiar with the original Battlestar Galactica, Andy, because you might.
I'm familiar with neither, to be honest.
So the remake is brilliant, Andy. If you like sci-fi, which is based on interstellar rating, you might not. It is a fantastic TV program. It's the Battlestar Galactica. I've got them all on DVD, and it's a program that I will watch throughout the whole series. There's multiple seasons. And I will watch them probably once every 2 years because I like it. And that is interesting, Andy, because going back to the other point, when they rebooted Battlestar Galactica, one of the characters who was, I can't think of the actor's name, but he was in the A-Team in the original series, was called Starbuck. And when they did the reboot, they made the character into a woman. And before it was aired, there was quite a lot of resistance because they turned a kind of a fan favourite male character into a female character. But it's been done brilliantly because she's really strong character, and she's like one of the best pilots, if not the best pilot. So that really worked well. They didn't do it just for the sake of it. They mix things up, and it is Battlestar Galactica. I think it's a fantastic TV series. And Lost in Space, another sci-fi one, Andy. There's a theme there, and that's good. And Sherlock, I have picked that because Sherlock is the one with Benedict Cumberbatch, and what's his name? The one from The Office as well.
Martin Freeman.
Yes, that's it, Martin Freeman. And I've classed that as a bit of a reboot, because obviously we've had, when my dad was younger, there was the old Sherlock Holmes TV programs and films. So I've classed that as a reboot. They're the three that kind of jump out to me. That Battlestar Galactica is one that I just love, Andy, and they've got some really attractive women in there as well, so it's brilliant, mixing it up for the geeky bit. And it's essentially, Andy, it's about robots that have that were made by men, like humans. The robots rebelled, kind of like Terminator. Then the robots disappear to the kind of end of the earth, and then years and years later, they come back and essentially wipe out pretty much all the humans, except for some that have managed to be on battleships and dotted around. But the twist is kind of like Terminator 2, actually. The robots have also developed some of their models to be look like humans. So they kind of then integrate into the humans as well, sort of acting as spies. But then as the season progresses, you got the robots who are known as Cylons. You get some that are sympathise with the humans, so then they work with the humans, even though the robots. And it's quite political. It's really, really good, actually, Andy. So I've bored you now with sci-fi stuff, Andy. What about you? What are the remakes or reboots that kind of jump out?
Well, I've got a sci-fi on my list I'll get into in a minute, but I have to agree with you on Sherlock. One of the best TV series I've ever seen, and Cumberbatch is tremendous in the role of Sherlock. Now, a few I've called out, very, very varying in terms of categorization. So I'm going to start with Gladiators, the game show, I guess you'd call it, or it's a game show. It was, so I guess it falls into the realms of sports entertainment. But back in the 90s, there was Gladiators, and there was American Gladiators in the for America, and I guess there's other versions around the world where you had, the likes of Wolf and Shadow and Jet and Lightning, and there were various events that they could take on competitors in, like the Pugil Sticks and the Travelator, fantastic series. Absolutely loved it. And I actually met one of the gladiators at the Goose Fair in Nottingham. Shadow, I met. He was signing autographs. He's a big guy. A big guy. Rebooted, remade in 2008, 2009 sort of time, with Caroline Flack and Ian Wright as the host for Sky One. And then remade again. And I think it's just started, as we're recording this, it just started last weekend. With Bradley Walsh and his son on BBC One, a new version of Gladiators, which I've recorded but not yet watched, but I'm certainly looking forward to watching. Now, switching over to crime drama, the series SWAT, starring Shemar Moore in the kind of main role as Hondo. Really, really good series. I've probably mentioned on the pod before, me and my wife like these kind of cop dramas that are nice, easy watch, and these are ones where it's generally a different story each week, so you don't necessarily have to pay close attention, as it were, but it's good action, good drama, and the role of Hondo in particular, I think stands out, and he was brilliant in Criminal Minds, so he's got a good background. And I mentioned sci-fi, I will get back to, and that's the one that I remembered is the series V, which I believe was an early 80s series originally, and was remade not that long ago, actually, maybe in the last 10-15 years, if memory serves correctly. Really enjoyed that, about the extraterrestrials coming down onto Earth, and the whole shenanigans and things that led off that, but it was very, very good. Didn't see much of the original, so I can't compare, but certainly a very, very good version itself. And then finally, in the comedy space, I guess it's a remake because it's a different audience, and that's The Office, the US version. So obviously, for those of you in the know, The Office was originally UK, made by Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant. Only 12 episodes and a couple of specials. In the US, they remade it with Steve Carell. I think, if memory serves correctly, the first episodes are basically identical in both versions, but then the US version took on a bit of a life of its own and ran for many, many seasons. And it's probably regarded as one of the funniest comedies in recent times.
Yeah, I agree, Andy. In terms of the I've got a few follow-up questions. So I agree, the Office, the US version, is one that I would say I've rewatched 4 or 5 times all the way through. And the other year, my wife had never watched it. And you know, The Office, they're like 20 to 30 minutes long. So the easy watches, something that we tend to, we'd like to watch a short program while we have dinner. And I really like The Office, the American version. I personally think it's better than the UK version. And, it's got 9 seasons from memory, so it's really enjoyable. Now, a couple of follow-up points, Andy. While you were talking, I was doing a bit of online research, and I didn't realise that the Gladiators was actually based on an American Gladiators. So I always thought it was a British one, but the American version came out first, and then we've obviously got the British version. And SWAT, while you've been talking, are you aware that the next season is the last season? The 7th is the last one.
I think I did know that, yeah. And I'd imagine it would have been out already had it not been for the recent writers' strike. Right.
Yeah, so it says on Wikipedia, because we know that's right all the time, that it will premiere in February 2024, and it's the 7th and final season. So, Andy, with that coming to an end, is there like a natural finishing point? Because I don't watch it. Is there any kind of those kinds of TV programs are quite, each episode focuses on, say, like a particular crime, but over a season you might have a story arc that's happening in the background. Is there anything that kind of happened in a previous season that hasn't kind of been tied up yet, or do you think there's going to be a completely new kind of story arc for that last season?
I wonder if it'll be pretty much completely new, but in terms of it bringing to a natural ending, I wonder whether Hondo either losing his role or retiring would be one way to go, because he does have he has butted heads with the brass before, and there has been some themes of like racial discrimination and whether he should be in the lead role as a black man, and the racial hostilities that have been prevalent in America in recent years. They've kind of played off some of that in some of the storylines, so I wonder if they'll do something with that to make it end. It's been really, really well done in terms of how they've handled some of these topics, like social injustice and racism and the relationship between the public and the police. It's been really, really well done. But it feels like something in that space, or maybe the team get replaced or killed off or whatever. There's a number of ways it could go.
So, these kind of TV programs that you watch, Andy, they tend to have spin-offs, don't they? So they'll have, say, NCIS, and then it'd be like different locations, etc. And I think you mentioned in the past, is it FBI?
Yeah, there's
and then have spin-offs.
Yeah, a couple of spin-offs.
So with SWAT, is that just on its own, or is there any kind of spin-offs with SWAT? Do you know?
No spin-offs that I'm aware of. I think it's one of those where I'm not sure a spin-off would necessarily work. I think because it is focused on a specific team within the police department as opposed to just the police, it would be a little bit strange to have a spin-off.
Yeah. Okay. Nice.
Shall we move on to some film remakes? Because that's really what we're here to talk about, is the film remakes rather than TV. Now, I would like to spend some time, if we can, talking about Disney. And the reason I bring Disney up is because in recent years, they've been remaking quite a lot of their animated features as live-action films. And I just wonder, what do you think of this approach?
I think because there's so many animated films that are being adapted into live action films, and for me, Andy, personally speaking, so you obviously might have a different view. I think there's been a varying degrees of success. So the ones that kind of jump out in my mind are some of the recent ones, so The Lion King, Aladdin, and Mulan. Now, personally speaking, I actually think they're quite weak compared to some of the other films that Disney remade. And I personally would rather watch the animated versions of those, especially Mulan. I love Mulan, the animated one. I like Aladdin, some really good songs. My wife likes that as well. Lion King as well. I think that's a pretty good animated film, quite iconic, really, with Elton John. And I personally, I've watched them all, the live action ones, but I've only ever watched them once. I've got no intention of rewatching them. They'd never grabbed me, but I would happily sit and rewatch the animated ones. And on the flip side of that, though, there are some animated versions that have been made into a live adaptation that I do like. So The Beauty and the Beast, with Emma Watson, obviously famous from Harry Potter films, Luke Evans and Dan Stevens. I've seen that a few times. I like the animated version as well. And I remember being, I can't remember exactly how old I was, but Beauty and the Beast, from memory, was one of the first, if not the first, animated film that they did in 3D, in the ballroom scene where they're dancing. And I remember watching that on VHS, because I'm old, as a kid, and I just remember being so amazed by it. And the live action one, it's funny because we've watched these with my daughter, and she doesn't really like them either, the live action ones. It's like, you think Beauty and the Beast, like, I don't want to generalize, but a young girl you'd think would just love that. And she wasn't fussed. She watched it once and she didn't get hooked. Whereas my wife loves the animated Beauty and the Beast. She could listen, when she works, I listen to cinematic playlist. She listens to Disney songs playlist when she works, and she has all those old classics, like when we were growing up. And another one, where I'm talking about my daughter, the Dumbo film. I didn't like that, and that actually made my daughter cry. With the mom being separated with Dumbo, so she found that quite upsetting, really. But I did like, doing a flip side again, the Nicolas Cage film, The Sorcerer's Apprentice. It might, people might not have a good rating on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't know. I didn't look. But I've seen that film quite a lot, and I really enjoy that one. I think it's good, and I'd love to see a sequel of that, actually. So I'm a bit hit and miss. I suppose it goes back to our comments about the remakes, really. It depends what the quality's like, the output. And, when we're talking about this, Andy, thinking about, you mentioned Disney, they're still making them. There's going to be more that are coming out that obviously makes Disney a lot of money. And when we've been looking at it, I can see they're making a new Lion King and Mufasa one. I've seen in the news there's a Snow White one, and Moana, which I believe The Rock, link it to wrestling again, Andy. Moana is being made into a live action one, which I personally don't like the animated one of that, so I won't be watching the live action one. They're coming out in the next 2 years. So I don't know what's your thoughts, Andy, about the Disney ones, and if you do like them or you don't like them, do you have any kind of favourites or ones that you just want to stay away from?
For the most part, I've enjoyed the ones that I've seen. I think Moana is an interesting one because it's not like it's an old film, is it? So it's something like a Snow White or a Beauty and the Beast to a lesser extent, and Aladdin. There's a time gap, so it could almost feel fresh. But when it's Moana, it's just come out and then you bring it out again. That seems unnecessary. There's a part of me that thinks that they should focus more on creating original content, i.e. new stories, because otherwise it becomes quite diluted, and it does feel quite diluted with just how many there've been in recent years. But it's interesting the points you make in terms of you enjoy the animation more, your daughter enjoys the animation more. Who is the audience for the remakes? Because I don't know. I've not done any research or anything, but I wonder how many people prefer the live action remakes to the animated originals. So are they trying to cater to a different audience than they already have? And the audience they already have is basically everyone anyway, isn't it? It's like, who doesn't like Disney films? There's a short list, I would imagine.
And Andy, thinking back to your comments earlier about changing things unnecessarily, the Little Mermaid obviously caused quite a stir where they recast the main character Ariel from Memory. Kind of thing. I've not seen the new Little Mermaid film, but my daughter and my wife has, and they weren't impressed with it.
I'm okay with the quote unquote recasting, because it's a fictional character and it's a mermaid. It's not. It's a little bit different to James Bond, which is definitely a male character. Some people would say, well, James Bond is a white male Scottish character. Not necessarily. I think you can have a black man in the role. That's fine. Little Mermaid is no problem. It's a mermaid, and also it's an animated person being now portrayed by a real person. It's not really a big deal. So I think people are making a bit too much of that. But again, what was wrong with the animated version? Did you need the live action version? I don't know. But like I said, I enjoyed them. You mentioned Aladdin earlier. I thought that was a really good film, to be honest. And the big thing that people said there is Will Smith going to do Robin Williams as Genie any justice? I thought Will Smith did really good in the role. But let's be honest, Robin Williams is the Genie, isn't he? So he's always going to take that mantle. So, yeah, I think in terms of the Disney films, I'm comfortable from a business point of view that that's what they want to do. I just question from a creative point of view whether it's actually necessary. But that's just my personal take.
Andy, sorry to cut in there. When you mentioned about James Bond being Scottish, and obviously we discussed that in our James Bond season.
We did indeed.
And you obviously brought that up in one of the episodes. And I listened to a James Bond audio book the other day. And as James Bond was just about to kill an English person, the English person said something like, you won't kill a fella Englishman. And James Bond quotes, I am half Scottish and half Swiss. And I thought of you, Andy, pulling it out as Scottish. Yeah, so I digress, but I thought I wanted to mention that.
The Swiss element is new.
I
was unaware of anyway.
Yeah, I was wondering that was kind of like alluding to, where his parents died, didn't they? Was it in the Swiss Alps or something? And I didn't know it was linked to that, or where he spent time with Blofeld in that, the reboot part of the franchise.
Yeah, it wasn't. Now you mention it, wasn't his mum's name like Monique or something? I'll have to Google it. I'm live on there. Monique Delacroix, the Canton du Vard. There you go. I've butchered that pronunciation, so I do apologise. But yes, apparently there is that Swiss element. So I stand corrected.
Half and half, a mix. So don't beat yourself up, Andy.
It's like Toblerone chocolate on shortbread. If it's part Swiss and part Scottish. I'll work on that analogy and edit something cleverer. And I won't. I'll leave it in. But anyway, let's get back to the subject of remakes. What are some of your favourites?
We've just been talking about James Bond, so I'm just going to throw it straight out there. Casino Royale with Daniel Craig is one of my favourites in terms of remakes. Dawn of the Dead is another really good film, actually. A couple of cowboy films, so The Magnificent Seven and A Fistful of Dollars. I love Western films. The Thing that I mentioned earlier, and The Mummy. So this is the Stephen Sommers one, not the Tom Cruise one, the one with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz. I loved The Mummy growing up. Number 2 is good. Number 3, I give that one a miss. But my favourite out of these ones, and Dread. We had your Sylvester Stallone one, which he doesn't wear. He wears his helmet, but he takes it off. And if you read the comics, he pretty much all the time never takes his hat. He's kind of like the Mandalorian, doesn't take his helmet off. And the Dread remake, he kept his helmet on all the time. Brilliant film. But my favourite, I would probably say, is The Departed. You got Leonardo DiCaprio, you got Matt Damon, Mark Wahlberg, Jack Nicholson. It's brilliant, and actually it's based on an Asian film. I don't know if it's Chinese film, The Infernal Affairs, and I love The Infernal Affairs as well. That's a trilogy, and it got remade. Martin Scorsese and directed The Departed. It's a brilliant one. If you like gangster films, Andy, I don't know if you do or not, that is definitely one worth checking out. You might have even seen it before. So
I have indeed. It's a fantastic film. So I highly recommend that. Some good ones on the list that you've given there, and sometimes you don't realise they're remakes, do you? Like The Departed, I wouldn't necessarily have thought of as a remake, but I just knew from reading, like you mentioned, The Infernal Affairs, but I've not seen the original, so I've no idea. But I'll add a few of my own to that list. The Taking of Pelham 123. I was on TV recently. The John Travolta version. Really, really good film. And it was Denzel Washington, isn't it, in the control room. Very, very good film. Very well done. The Lady Killers. Decent film. Tom Hanks. Probably not one of his better ones, but I have seen the original. Hanks' version is better in my view. The Italian Job was that was Jude Law, wasn't it? In the Michael Caine role, if memory serves.
Was it? Mark Wahlberg.
Mark Wahlberg. Jude Law was in it, wasn't he? Am I making that up?
I would have to live Google that one, Andy.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe, I'll leave that in. If I'm wrong, apologies, but that's the name that came to mind. It's late as we're recording, but I have seen the remake and I have seen the original. Both decent. The Longest Yard, Adam Sandler. This is the film where they're in prison and they play American football against the gods. I quite like that because it's got a bunch of wrestling personalities in there as well. So it's got Steve Austin, Kevin Nash, Bill Goldberg, the Great Khali, a few other names as well. Decent film. The aforementioned Ocean's 11, obviously a remake from the Rat Pack version that came out in the 50s or 60s, I guess it would be. And one film that I didn't realise was a remake, but again, one I've seen on TV quite recently, and that's Mr. Deeds. Again, another Adam Sandler film. Very, very funny film.
So a couple of points there, Andy. I like The Taking of Pelham 123, a good film. Italian Job is really good. Longest Yard, I do find quite funny, and we've obviously mentioned Ocean's 11. The Lady Killers, though, I dislike that film, and I can't believe, Andy, you said it's better than the original, because my dad loves watching old films, and for one of his Christmases in the past, he asked me to get like the Ealing Studios like films, and that's Lady Killers is one of them. So you got a lot of older famous actors in like Peter Sellers and Alec Guinness and stuff. But my dad loves all those old comedy films. But Lady Killers is obviously, we didn't cover that in the Tom Hanks season, thankfully. But it's just a film I personally don't like. The Italian Job Italian Job is one of those films, Andy. It's a shame it never got a sequel. Especially the original, with the ending where the bus is like hanging over the cliff.
Yeah.
It's a shame that never got a sequel.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. It was a good film. I'm just going back to the point, because I mentioned Jude Law, and now I feel like a fool because I don't think he's in it at all, is he?
I don't recall. Definitely Mark Wahlberg. I can't remember all the supporting cast.
Definitely Mark Wahlberg, yeah. Jason Statham's in it.
Oh, yes. But I just want to say, I don't know if this is the same if you've kind of experienced this, Andy, but I have some time. So A Fistful of Dollars is a Western film with Clint Eastwood. It's a brilliant film. And I remember coming across that, and it's actually been remade after that one with Bruce Willis in. I'm trying to think. Is it? No, it's not Last Boy Scout. But the Fistful of Dollars has also been remade. So Fistful of Dollars is a remake of like a Japanese film. And then The Clint Eastwood version was then later remade with Bruce Willis. And I'm just going to check what that was. Last Man Standing, that's it. Last Man Standing, good film, Bruce Willis. Yeah, but I do like a good Western film. And I haven't seen it Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3 for years, and maybe I've only ever seen it once and twice. But yeah, Denzel Washington, good film.
Yeah, really enjoyed that. We may have some same ones on the list for this next question, but are there any remakes that are better than the original in your opinion?
Yeah, there's a few. Casino Royale is one that definitely sticks out. The Thing is another. War of the Worlds is the one with Tom Cruise and Steven Spielberg. I think that's really good. I've seen the original one, which I don't know, it's 1950s or something, and my dad likes that one as well. The Mummy is the one that really stands out, the Stephen Sommers version. And Dune, the first one, and then it had a sequel as well, looked really, really dated. So I don't know if you've seen Dune, Andy, the one that came out a few years ago. My son and I went to see it in a cinema, and it's really, really good. So I'm looking forward to number 2 as well.
I've not seen Dune either version. There's quite a few on that list that I've not seen, so I definitely agree with you about the Mummy and Casino Royale, but the others can't really compare because it's difficult, obviously, without seeing both. But one example I want to add to that, because I've seen both versions, all of them are really, really freaky and all very, very good, is the film It from the Stephen King book. So the original, really, really good, but I just slightly preferred the newer version. Now, I may have told this story in the pod before, but when I first watched the original It, got it on DVD, and me and my wife were watching it, and it was a bit scary, a bit weird, and then it just kind of ended, and we were like, oh, it's a bit of a dull ending, didn't really enjoy that. Took the DVD out, realised it was a double-sided DVD. Second part of the film was on the other side. But when you look at the disc, it's completely just shiny, and then the title is just in the very, very middle of the disc. So it was just pure chance that we actually put it in the right way up, because if we'd have put it in the other way around without realising, we'd have watched part 2 first and would have been really confused.
It's always dangerous when you might put it in the wrong way, Andy.
You should never put it in upside down.
Yes, yeah. Andy, I've got a confession to make, and I think I might have said this before. I don't like horror films, so I've not seen any of the It's. I'm aware of it, social media, advertisement boards, it's a clown. I've never read the book, because I've read some horror films, but horror books. But yeah, horror films, books, TV programs don't really do it for me. So I've stayed well away from it, because I remember it coming out, a few years ago, and it being obviously a big thing, and you've obviously said that there's another one, then a sequel to that as well. So obviously it's done well. But yeah,
they've done. If I remember correctly, they did the remake, and then they did a chapter 2. So the remake, I don't know if, because the original film was a 2-parter, I can't remember exactly how it works, but I think it was similar kind of idea where you've got the story from when they're kids, and then they get back together when they're grown up, and the clown's still terrorizing. And I think that's what they've done with the remakes, that they've done it as 2 separate films as opposed to a 2-part film, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, my horror films that I've seen is very limited. I've seen things like The Shining, Pet Sematary, and some other like Halloweens and Friday the 13th and Jason and stuff like that. But that was when I was younger, growing up, and you kind of think, these are like either classics or films that, people talk about. So now my wife will watch horror films that have been in the news or cinema, stuff like that. She's literally, actually, a few days ago, watched all the Scream films again. And it's funny because I walked in, I think I've seen the first 2 or 3 maybe, and I said to her, I always confuse Scream because I've watched scary movie films and I can never remember which characters with which, because then when the police person came out, I was half expecting, I think his name's Dewey, from the scary movie film. So yeah, my wife does like horror films, but I don't. Do you like generally like horror films then, or you just happen to watch it?
I very few. I wouldn't necessarily seek out a horror film, but I like it. I like the Saw films. They're more gore rather than scary. The thing I don't like about horror films is I always jump at the least scary parts. just because of how they build up the tension, and then something happens, and it could just be like you walk around a corner and there's someone there, and rather than like the slasher scenes or whatever. So I always jump at the bits that aren't scary, so I look like a fool. But I'm not into the scary for being scared's sake. I prefer something with a story, and sometimes I find the horror films I have seen, they don't really have much of a story. They just have moments of scariness, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like jump scare kind of thing.
Yeah, just for the sake of it. So generally not a fan of horror, but I don't mind the odd one here and there. And It is a very, very good film, and I think the storyline is very good as well. So worth a watch, I would say. A couple more things before we move on. So there are some future ones to look out for in the coming years. Jay, you've called out a few that you're either looking forward to or you're aware of. Why don't you enlighten the viewers on some you found?
Yeah, so Red Sonja is one that is coming out. Blade is one that should have been out, I believe, but it keeps getting delayed and delayed. I like the Wesley Snipes Blade films. Fantastic Four is one I'm intrigued to see, because we've had a few Fantastic Four films, and it has been remade, rebooted already, and this is another attempt at remaking, rebooting that franchise. So there are three that are coming out that I'm looking forward to seeing, or I will check it out. What about you, Andy, and the others?
Yeah, a couple that I am aware of. Superman Legacy. Now, I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with Superman. I think as standalone films, they're generally okay. The thing that kind of puts a downer on me was when they did Batman vs Superman, because Batman is by far the superior character, and I felt that rather than Batman elevating Superman to new heights, I think Superman dragged Batman down and made it quite a poor film. So it'd be interesting to see where they go with Superman. And one that Netflix have the rights to is Chronicles of Narnia. Now, I've not seen all of the Narnia films from, when would it be? The mid-2000s? Maybe early 2010s, something like that. But it'd be interesting to see where they go with this, because, classic storybooks, I'm sure they've been made in various other different forms as well. So it'd be really good to see what happens to them in the hands of Netflix, because some of Netflix original stuff has been pretty impressive in recent years, particularly probably more so their TV series, I would say, rather than their films, although some of their films are fantastic. So that is one that intrigues me.
Yeah, Chronicles of Narnia, I've read the books when I was a kid, and I've seen, like you, Andy, I've seen some of the films, and if I recall, I think there may be a TV series or Christmas specials that someone, like, I don't know, like the BBC or someone made years and years ago. Superman, I'm like you, Andy. I don't mind Superman, but I agree the Batman vs Superman and the whole Justice League films are just rubbish in my opinion. So sorry, people out there that love the DC extended universe. One of my brothers loves the Superman and Batman films, and he was telling me at Christmas, and he's like, "Oh no, I don't like him at all."
There was some talk at work, I think, in recent days about, I want to say the Justice League film, because isn't there a extended edition which is like 4 hours long or something?
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Oh god, nothing needs to be 4 hours long. So one final question on the subject of remakes or reboots as well, we can include. Are there any films that you think would benefit from a remake?
So Andy, I'm going to throw some titles out there, okay, and I'm intrigued to see what you think as well. And listeners, let us know on our social medias or email websites what you think, because I'm not necessarily saying that they should have a remake, but I think in terms of the time that there's been, that's passed, and a new generation, might want to see a remake. So Waterworld, Kevin Costner film, which I really enjoyed. It'd be quite nice to see a modern version of that with the new technology we've got. Flash Gordon, so that's a film from 1980, and obviously linking back to James Bond. It had Timothy Dalton in as well. That'd be quite interesting to see. Gremlins is another one. So Gremlins came out in the 1980s as well. So that's like a 40 years old film, and I think that'd be quite good to kind of have a remake. Now, thinking back to season 2, Big. Now, I think that could be a good remake. I do. But then I'm a bit hesitant about it because it's a classic. We scored it well in season 2. So I want to kind of put that out there, Andy, for some comments for you in a second. Big is one. But also the Goonies and E.T. They're classics from our childhood. But again, it's like, can they be remade for the new generations coming through? I think they still stand up. Obviously, we watch Big. I haven't seen the Goonies for years. And another one, and I saw this on social media actually, because this got a bit of a mixed reception. I don't know if there's talks or not, but Back to the Future, there's been links with Tom Holland taking over the Michael J. Fox role. Now, I love Back to the Future. I've got the trilogy box set somewhere on Blu-ray, but I don't know how I feel about that one. That's an older film as well, so in terms of like the time period passing, you could say it could be remade, but I'm a bit unsure on like Big, The Goonies, E.T. and Back to the Future. So Andy, before I pose that question back to you, what are your thoughts on those 4 in particular?
I think of those 4, I would say The Goonies is the one that interests me the most. And I think that's one where you could remake it and it have a positive review. Because I don't necessarily... Although the characters themselves, I think, are pretty iconic, as is the film, I don't think you necessarily associate the actors as much in the iconic roles. Whereas something like a Big... Can it be anyone other than Tom Hanks, really? And I know we did a bit of recasting, didn't we, on our Big episode?
Yes, we did, yeah.
Yeah, it's Tom Hanks. It's got to be Tom Hanks. Anyone else is going to be less than. And I think Back to the Future kind of falls into that category as well. I can't imagine anyone other than Michael J. Fox in that role. I think the only thing about Back to the Future that is quite interesting and something we've seen in recent years is when it was made, one of the futures was what we would deem now the present, because I think, wasn't it like 2015 was one of the dates that they went to, and there's hoverboards and flying cars and all kinds of things that obviously didn't come to pass. So I wonder if they would make in the newer version, a more realistic future, as it were. And the way things are going, it would probably be a future where the world's burning, climate change has taken over, the oils run dry and there's starving, and so it's a very different future than the kind of glass half full approach that there was back in the 80s. It's more doom and gloom these days, so it could be more of an Armageddon type film. But yeah, I think The Goonies is the one that kind of stands out to me from those 4 that I think would be worthy of a remake.
That's interesting, Andy, and you're right. Yeah, they're good how you put it. It's 2015. It was the latest they travel in terms of the future. That's the period. So yeah. I personally think, Andy, the Goonies is one where I think if they did it right and picked the right actors, you could kind of do a sequel from that as well, as long as you're keeping it fresh. Like focus on the kids in terms of like adventures, or even if you did like a Disney Plus TV series or something like that. I think that is one that kind of lends it to a remake, or take it from the big screen and do a TV series for it.
Yeah, I agree. You could almost create like a Goonies multiverse, for lack of a better term, couldn't you?
Yeah, because like if it's successful and they could like spawn the films out where the kids are getting older, like Stranger Things, and then like even if like certain characters kind of take off, you could do spin-offs. There's like you said, a franchise, a universe there. So Andy, I've picked out some films that could either be remade or rebooted. What about you? Which ones kind of jump out for you?
I think Jaws would be an interesting one for me, and like what you mentioned earlier, it's mainly from a special effects point of view and the technology that's moved on, because it's been it's best part 50 years, isn't it now, since Jaws was released. Very scary, iconic film, but doesn't really stand the test of time visually. So I think if you were to create something in that spirit, same kind of story, but with up-to-date visuals, I think that could be an epic, really. But I also want to go back to season 1 of the Rating Room. We talked about James Bond. I'd like to see a couple of remakes for different reasons. One would be Moonraker, the dreaded Moonraker. Terrible, terrible Bond film as it was. Surely it'd be a better film this time round if it was remade for a modern audience. And another one, but for a different reason, would be Goldfinger, an absolute classic. Be very difficult to live up to the hype of that, because we rated it very highly, and I think a lot of people rate it very highly as one of the best Bond films of all time. An updated remake of that might be fun, though.
So I'm really intrigued about Jaws, Andy, because my wife approached me the other day and said they're remaking Jaws. I went, really? Are they remaking Jaws? Really? Show me this. And she showed me the trailer. I nearly said her name there. I said, wife. I said, someone's just spliced different clips of sharks and put them together. And I can't remember the character's name, but the scientist character. He's an older man now. So I said, the splice things from his other films and put them all together. I said, Google that. And she Googled it, and yeah, it's fake. And she said, why do people do that? She got really angry with it. I said to her, I don't know if they could do remake of Jaws, because there's films like The Meg, isn't there, and Deep Blue Sea and stuff, which I know is not the same. But Jaws, one of the things that's good is I watched it actually not too long ago again, and you don't see Jaws in the film that often. And because when it was made, if I remember correctly from reading things, I don't think necessarily they had a full shark in terms of the model because of the cost, or there were problems with it. So the aspects of the Jaws, it's more the sound and the environment and building it up. Do you know what I mean?
The anticipation rather than the event. That's a good point.
So I don't know how, I think Jaws is a brilliant film, and I think it spawned at least 2 sequels from memory. But the James Bond ones, Andy, is interesting because they've obviously remade Casino Royale, but it's like, what do they do? Could they do, because we don't know what's happening with the James Bond future. Could they do something similar where they reboot it and, use your examples, reboot it from one of these films, or, just a standalone film like we're saying Moonraker. I get why you're saying about Moonraker, because obviously it's one of your favourite James Bond films. Got Goldfinger and stuff. Yeah, it's interesting. And it's just in the future, even though we're saying now about making a James Bond film, like in 10, 20, 30, 40 times, I can imagine them remaking a James Bond film. I can see that. And I don't know if it'd be purely for money or not, but I can imagine, if the franchise ever starts dipping off again, I can imagine them picking a classic James Bond film or another one that maybe, like you said, Moonraker, and using that to start again, relaunch it. I can imagine that.
Yeah, because it's not really been done, has it? I mean, Casino Royale is a remake, technically, but it's not really as well, because the original was very much a spoof, so it wasn't a proper Bond film. And the other one, obviously, is Thunderball and Never Say Never Again. Never Say Never Again doesn't count as a proper Bond film, but it is a remake of Thunderball, and didn't really live up to the hype, I don't think. Thunderball is definitely the better version. But, something like Dr. No is 62 years old now. How many people really remember it? So if you created this brand new film called Dr. No, and you use the story from Dr. No, but with a modern twist, could be a fascinating film, and open a whole new audience up to James Bond.
And if you don't remember it, make sure you listen to our season 1 podcast where we rewatch all the James Bond films.
Indeed, yeah. Well, back in the archives, some 70 odd episodes ago now.
Indeed.
Yes. But that's our little talk on all things remake. It'd be good to know what our listeners out there think. What remakes do you like? What remakes don't you like? Are there films that should be remade in future? Many things that could be discussed. Now, coming up, we are going to talk about Dexter Season 3, of course, because that's what we like to do on these specials, is continue our voyage into the world of Dexter. But before we get there, I just want to highlight a couple of things coming up in the coming weeks. So as you're listening to this, it should be around the end of January if we've got ourselves together. So coming up next week, we're going to be talking about the film Layer Cake. Really looking forward to this one, because this is another one that I've not actually seen before. So be interesting to get my views on that from a first-time watcher's perspective. And then in 2 weeks' time, Love is in the Air, Valentine's Day. So we're going to bring you something a bit more romantic to the rating room as we talk about the classic Tom Hanks film, You've Got Mail. But that's all to come. But before we get to any of that, let's move on to our small screen rank bank, shall we? And talk all things Dexter Season 3.
The Rain Room.
So, Jay, let's get into Dexter Season 3. We left Season 2 with Dokes being killed. Not by Dexter, actually by Lila, wasn't it? So, but Dexter got away with it in the end, so it's almost a clean slate for Season 3. Let me give the listeners just a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about over the next several minutes/hours, depends on how this goes. Season 3 of Dexter throws our blood splatter analyst into a whirlwind of complications, balancing his vigilante urges with a blossoming romance with Rita, who throws a curveball by announcing her pregnancy. Dexter gets tangled up with Assistant District Attorney Miguel Prado. Miguel, initially an ally, becomes an unexpected threat, as Dexter is forced to kill in self-defense, setting off a chain of events that puts both of their secrets at risk. Now, I was really looking forward to this season, but let's get into it, shall we? Why don't you start us off with episode 1?
Yeah, so episode 1 is called Our Father, and it begins with Dexter having some flashbacks. So we've obviously finished season 2, and Dexter's been busy because we have these flashbacks, and he's killing more people, so he's back in the swing of things, really. And he's talking to his dentist while he's having these flashbacks, and I thought that was quite a nice little intro. And everything seems to be going well for Dexter, life is going well. And a little side note here, Rita is looking super hot.
She certainly is, and I made a note that not only is she looking hot, she is horny AF, as the kids might say, or as I wrote in my notes, she's craving a bit of Dexter.
Yeah, she is. She's developed so much, hasn't she, since season 1. She's really, blossomed. She's really. I'm trying to think, Andy. What is the terminology? Would you say that she's? Because I can't say she's really developed because she's a middle-aged lady.
You don't mean physically developed, do you? You mean develops personally, and
her confidence is definitely back after the abusive marriage that she had with Paul.
Season 1, she was almost victim, still shy, timid, scared individual. Now she's an independent woman. She's a sister doing it for herself.
So Andy, Rita's looking hot, and I just want to say something, Andy. This is a common theme throughout the 2 seasons that we've had so far, and also in season 3. Dexter loves bringing donuts in for everyone.
Yeah, it's almost like a mask that he hides behind, isn't it? Everyone thinks he's a nice guy because he brings donuts in. Maybe that's just one way to hide the fact of he's not so nice after all.
So Dexter loves bringing in donuts, and also I did a double take, Andy, because I made a note here to say Deb has a new hairstyle, because I was thinking when she first came on, I'm thinking there's something different about her. I'm sure her hair's a lot shorter. And interestingly, I've been waiting for this moment as well, because we're introduced to Quinn, because I remember Quinn, because we see him in later seasons as well, and I couldn't remember when he came into Dexter, and obviously it's in season 3.
Yeah, a bit earlier than I remembered it, to be honest. For some reason, I had in my head that Lundy would be around for a bit longer, but I guess that's not the case. And you noticed Deb's new hairstyle, but someone didn't, did they? That was Dexter himself.
No, yeah, and he's really meticulous, really. So you would have thought he would have noticed that.
You would think that, considering what he's
Unless
all
it's
about.
like an act, maybe.
No, I didn't get that sense at all.
No, I think it's genuine.
I think it probably falls more in the category of he just does not care about people at all. But let's talk about Quinn. We're introduced to him, but very, very quickly find out that he's under an internal affairs investigation. So straight away he's into the thick of it. And Batista as well has got a bit of news coming because he's due a promotion in the next couple of days. So there's a lot happening. That's I guess from the fallout of season 2 to season 3, things are progressing.
They are, and also I don't know. It's at this point, Andy, where you notice that the room has slightly changed, so it's had a bit of an uplift, a face lift, hasn't it? As well, have you noticed
the office?
Because
you mean,
yes, yeah,
I can't say I did, to be honest.
yeah. So unless they didn't kind of cover it, so Dexter seems to have a desk outside of his little secure area. And I don't remember him having a desk in season 1 and 2. Because originally I thought, they've changed that. But then he does go into his like little lab area. And then I was thinking, we don't see him have a desk in season 1 and 2. Because you notice on the back, on the wall, he has those like prints of blood splatters and stuff. And then I'm thinking, do we only ever see him sat down when he was in his lab and not at his desk? And maybe did he always have his desk there? I just noticed he had more scenes through this season where he was at his desk working and not just purely doing his lab stuff in his little room.
I didn't know if that little lab area was just like a room off of his room.
Yeah, I think it is. But I mean, in season 1 and 2, you see him in his lab. But I didn't know if that desk area was always there, because I don't recall seeing it, or you just didn't, he wasn't highlighted in season 1 and 2. But it seemed to have a bit of a facelift.
I didn't notice that. That's a good spot there.
We get into it now, don't we, really? So we've had a bit of an update around what's happening with all the main players. And Dexter sneaks into Freebo's place, but he's being attacked by a bloke. And we don't know who this bloke is yet, but the bloke attacks Dexter, and he is accidentally killed, actually, during the struggle. So he's an innocent victim by Dexter, because he obviously wasn't on Dexter's hit list.
No, straight away it's going against the code, isn't it? This is, and also we've discussed this in the past couple of specials. He's taking more and more risks. Like the Dexter of old wouldn't have made that mistake. He would have been more meticulous. So the fact that there's an unknown party there it really goes against what Dexter's all about. But I say is an unknown party. We find out pretty soon who that is, and it's the younger brother of Miguel Prado, who is the ADA.
And did you remember this, Andy? Because I didn't. I couldn't remember how Miguel was introduced in this season before we started rewatching it. Because I remembered Miguel Prado, and I remembered that he had a brother, and we find out later on it's Ramon. But I couldn't remember that he had another brother, the younger brother. So when I was watching, I thinking, how did they introduce Miguel? And then obviously you get introduced in the first episode.
Yeah, I couldn't remember that. I just assumed he was brought in for a case. I didn't put the two together that the case was actually his own brother.
Yeah, so it's a nice little intro here. And it turns out Miguel and Laguetta have a bit of history as well.
Indeed. Not only that, Miguel gets to know Dexter quite soon because he calls him to the crime scene. He wants to talk through what happens. And he also checks up on Dexter's internet history, doesn't it? Because he wants to know why is a blood splatter guy looking up certain things about Oscar's life.
Yeah, he does. And I don't know if this kind of links into later on in the season where, Miguel is kind of accused or he gets investigated for like unethical stuff. So he can't be, looking into Dexter's internet activity wouldn't be something I think would be necessarily he should be doing at this point.
Doesn't seem like the job of an ADA, does it? but maybe because of the personal nature of the case, he's wanting absolutely everything. But why is Dexter using his work laptop? We've said this before. Why is he doing that?
Haven't we? Yeah. You would think how careful he goes about things. He would have a laptop just on the dark web that is separate to his work one. That just seems a bit of a schoolboy error. I know it is encrypted because later on in the season, doesn't he? He says it's encrypted, or Miguel turns around so he doesn't look at his password, doesn't he? But anyone could be, any IT person would be able to crack that. I'm surprised he doesn't have his own kind of laptop. Where he does.
You say that. I thought when Dexter does that, though, isn't that the laptop at his flat? So I assume that is his personal laptop, not his work laptop. Unless they are one and the same. But because it's just the fact that he's doing it at work. He's doing some of these things. That's the bit that is it's just a no-no. I don't even look up football results all the time at work. I mean, I do occasionally, on the BBC website. But beyond that, I don't really visit anything else.
No, all work stuff is monitored. So BBC is allowed. So I do look at BBC. I don't know if it's like at your work, but if you try to do anything, we get this piece of software, I think it's called Barracuda or something, that just splashes up on your screen, which is annoying because sometimes you'd be Googling some kind of medical condition that you try to research, or you figure out what it is, and then it just comes up with these restricted, and you think, oh, can I be bothered to phone IT to get it unblocked? And you think, no, I just use my phone or something. But talking about no-nos, Andy, Dexter fails to show up for Harry's do with Deb, which I thought was a bit surprising, but I suppose he's a bit busy, Dexter is at the moment.
Yeah, this is kind of going back to season 2, isn't it, where Dexter finds out who and what Harry is and the fact that he's been cheating, and at this point Deb doesn't know, so that kind of sets off a little bit of tension, doesn't it, between the two.
He does, yeah, because I think he feels a bit let down, doesn't he, by Harry.
Deb puts her foot in it pretty quickly, though, as she always does. She opens her mouth. There's a scene, I think, in the office where she's just mouthing. I can't remember what it is that she's saying, but basically she's shooting her mouth off, and Miguel overhears, and that upsets LaGuerta, so she takes her off the case.
I think, is this the bit where Deb finds out that the brother is a druggie?
Yes, that could be it. Yeah, so he's basically she's bad-mouthing the victim, effectively, isn't she?
Yes, yeah, and Miguel is in or around the office at that point.
Yeah, so she's made a mistake.
In terms of Freebo, we find out Freebo's girlfriend is found dead, and there's some skin removed as well from her shoulder area. So it's, I think this episode is really good because quite a lot of things happen, and now it's kind of coming to a close, and now it's alluding to, is there another serial killer out there? So I think there's a lot happening in this first episode.
It is, yeah. And I think the skin removal is tied to Freebo at this point.
Yes,
so
it is, yeah.
The implication is that maybe Freebo is going to be the main villain of the series. So there's a lot happening, like you said. Oh, and, just a minor thing to finish the episode. Rita's pregnant.
Yes.
No biggie. It's fine, Just, it's not like Dexter needs anything else in his life.
No, it's from this first episode, it feels like it's going to be a busy season for Dexter. Absolutely.
We've had 2 kills. We've had a whole bunch of bombshells and news dropped. The first episode's really kind of hit you in the face, hasn't it? But let's move on to episode 2, which is titled Finding Freebo.
And it kicks off with a bit of awkwardness, really, between Dexter and Rita because of the pregnancy as well. And what do they do next? And Andy mentioned in the previous episode 1, that the internal affairs and the cop is still pressuring Debs to help them out and investigate Quinn.
Yeah, don't really know what he's done or is accused of being done. It's still very cloak and daggers at this stage. Now, I've taken some quote notes, as I do along the way, One that made me chuckle was when Deb was speaking to Anton, who is the CI of Quinn's, isn't he? And he just says back to her, "Damn, you got a mouth on you, woman."
She has. It's lucky they don't have a swear jar in that office, because she will be skint. She is very... It's just everything she says, it's just constant swearing. And she's very crude as well, isn't she?
Yeah, to say the least.
And we've got Miguel. So Miguel's back in this, and he invites Dexter round for dinner. So they're beginning to get a bit cozy. And this is where Prada then tells Dexter about Ramon's lead and the link for Freebo's phone as well. So Dexter's, a bit worried here.
Yeah, he's, Miguel's on the case, but Dexter is also on the case, but from a different angle. So it's already, the seeds of rivalry are kind of being sown at this point, because, Dexter doesn't necessarily want to do things by the book. And you think Miguel does, because, he's an ADA after all. But there's another quote I wrote, because, sometimes the quotes just tickle me. And this one, I think, is an inner monologue from Dexter as they're going through the police station, when he says, "This department is becoming annoyingly effective."
Yeah, it is funny, that.
So let's switch gears, because Dexter, as well as his work life, his personal life going on. Rita's pregnant after all. He's unsure what to do, isn't he? He's a bit confused. But Batista, when he finds out, gives Dexter some reassurance, and he's like glowing with positivity, isn't he, Batista, on this news. And then Dexter has a dream about what the future would be like with his children and Rita, which is an interesting dream sequence, isn't it, for what it is?
It is, because it looks really positive, doesn't it, initially? And then it kind of turns into a nightmare, doesn't it, at the end?
Yeah, there's a mini Dexter potentially on the loose.
There is a mini Dexter. And we see Deb as well. So she's not impressed with the young pimp. I can't remember his name now. But he's not impressed. And we also witness Ramon and Miguel clash about what to do with Freebo. And we also see Lagretta then arrives to talk about another case. And I think it's interesting, because even now, where Miguel is telling like Dexter a few minutes ago about Ramon's lead and the phone link, it does highlight that Miguel doesn't mind going around, does he? Like, breaking kind of the rules to get what he wants. And again, that kind of plays out later on.
It does, for sure. And the cases being merged together, or not so much the cases being merged together, but the departments kind of working together, aren't they, at this point, which is going to cause some friction. Just a note on Ramon and Miguel. I think at this stage, you kind of set out about who they are. Ramon is a sheriff, but he's unhinged, isn't he? He's Miguel's kind of protective older brother, and Ramon is a little bit.
He's definitely like the hothead.
Hothead. That's a good description. So that's kind of setting the seat. Planting the seeds for who and what they're all about. So it's going to make for quite an interesting season, how they're going to interact, and also how Dexter interacts. But as the episode starts drawing to a close, Dexter finds Freebo, and he's naked in the house. So he goes back home to get his gear, his killing gear. But Rita kind of spoils the party a little bit, because she wants to talk about the pregnancy and wanting to keep the baby. So he's kind of, he's getting ready for the kill, but then Rita's wanting to talk. He's got a lot going on. But eventually he manages to get away and goes back to where Freebo is hiding.
He does. And it's interesting, because we see Dexter's working on Freebo, which is like in a shed/garage area. And Miguel is outside watching the place. I think this scene's really good, because you got Miguel kind of casing out the joint. So he's obviously managed to identify where Freebo is hiding, but he's not phoned for any police or anyone. He's not phoned for any backup. He's going in there to kind of take the law into his own hands. He's got his he enters the place, he's got a gun, he's looking for Freebo. And at the same time, we've got Dexter in the garage area. He kills Freebo, and it's really good because you're thinking, oh no, are they going to kind of like they're going to collide? Is he going to walk in and see Dexter cleaning up, killing Freebo? And then you see Miguel making his way through the house. He's making his way through the garden to the garage, and Dexter comes out and they meet each other in the garden. And Dexter then starts talking. He's quite quick, but he's really open, isn't he, actually, about, he did kill Freebo, but it was in self-defense. And then Miguel gives Dexter a hug, and he's really appreciative in terms of, he's killed Freebo, and he's kind of took the law into his own hands. And then Dexter says this. He says about leave it to him because of plausible deniability in terms of Miguel. Obviously, because he doesn't want to see him cutting up Freebo, does he? So he needs to kind of finish his routine. But I thought that whole scene was really, really good, and it is a good ending to this episode.
It is. It's really, really risky, though, what Dexter's doing here. I think, we're only 2 episodes in, but there's a lot of layers already in this season. I don't know if that's necessarily the right take. So at the point, obviously knowing what we know, how the season unfolds is a different story and things. But when you first see this, and you think this is a mistake that Dexter's made, because now Miguel has got this leverage over him. He knows that Dexter is a killer, albeit in self-defense. And you don't get the sense from Miguel that he's a killer at this stage. Yes, he's gone around looking for Freebo with his gun, but that's because his brother's died, so he's emotional, and you can kind of understand that. So it paints this picture where Dexter is kind of taking all the risk. And I wonder if an alternative would have been, say, oh, I was just in the garage and I can't find him, so don't worry about it, sort of thing, and try and usher him away. But obviously that's not what he's done.
I agree. I was when this happened, I was surprised that Dexter was quite open and honest to Miguel. I know he has a code, but if it was me, I think you would have dispatched Miguel as well to protect yourself.
Rule number 1, isn't it? Don't get caught.
And yeah, exactly. So I think that is the thing. I know he has the code. And obviously, you can't kill him now because he's going to ruin the whole season. But I think, in terms of protecting yourself, because he's putting lots of faith in Miguel not saying anything.
Yeah, it's very stressful as a viewer. It's very, very stressful.
So in terms of kills, that was 1 kill in episode 2. And it leads us nicely on to episode 3, what is called The Lion Sleeps Tonight.
Yeah, and we start with a scene with Dexter and family, just doing normal things. They're out shopping, and he comes across this bloke talking to Asta. I think he's asking her where a certain cereal is or something, and Dexter kind of says, it's on the other aisle. Kind of, but you can tell that his spidey senses are tingling at this point.
So Dexter is in the office now, and Miguel Prada arrives, and he's talking to Laguetta, and he thanks her for making Dexter available to him as well. And then Miguel invites Dexter out again, so he keeps inviting Dexter out, and this time for a drink and a smoke.
Yeah, it's a blossoming friendship at this point, isn't it? Although weird on the surface, isn't it? An ADA and a blood spatter analyst doesn't look like the mix.
No, it is very weird, and you're obviously going to see things playing out, but I think it is weird because you thought after what happened in the previous episode, maybe Miguel would have stayed away and kind of contemplated and thought things through, but he's there straight away in Dexter's workplace talking to Dexter's boss. So they go to the crime scene, and there is an aerial shot of the scene as well, and this reminded me who the real killer was. So in terms of the jumping back to episode 1, in terms of the skinning of Freebo's girlfriend Andy, I couldn't remember who was the killer in this episode until this shot. And as soon as this shot happened, I was like, oh yes, I remember who it is now.
Yeah, this was a good reminder for me, because I'd pretty much forgotten about this killer up until now. So yeah, a very, very good reminder, which we will get to in due time. But around this scene is when Deb goes to talk to one of the tree trimmers, and also Dexter tells Deb finally about the baby, and she expresses her delight in a way that only Deb can, when she says she's happy for Dexter because he's having a, quote, mother roly-poly chewy cheek machine. I've got a lot of beeping to put in there, haven't I?
That is a lot of beeping. And I know I said this in one of the previous episodes, Andy, but I'm just not a big fan of Deb. It's just, I don't know if it's all the swearing, but she's not my favourite character. I remember, because I said that, and I remember you saying your wife said the same, didn't she?
She finds her quite annoying, yeah. Whiny. So, later on, Dexter is investigating this bloke earlier from the supermarket who was talking to Asta. As you might expect, he's a paedophile. But then Miguel turns up at Dexter's apartment, so, let's put that on hold for a bit. And they seem to be bonding. They have a bit of booze. I think, is he bringing like a tequila or something at this stage? But they're bonding, they're having a drink, and they make plans to see the body tomorrow at lunch. The body of Freebo, this is. Because, sorry, go on.
No, I think it's quite quick thinking, because when Miguel turns up, you kind of think Miguel will come in, but he kind of says, I grab some glasses, don't he? And then they're essentially, I know it's not a balcony, but they stay outside, don't they, just drinking outside. So he doesn't want to kind of let Miguel in, does he? Get too close. And I think the bit I found really interesting was, Andy, where Dexter then tells Miguel that he buried Freebo's body in a cemetery. Now, I think that was how did Dexter did he just think of that, or is that something that he's used in the past in terms of using a fresh dog grave? I don't know. He just seemed to have that kind of idea already. I don't know. I don't know if it's something like, did he do that before he started throwing bodies out to sea? I don't know. I don't know if it's mentioned, but he seemed to know what to tell Miguel in terms of what he did with the body. It wasn't like he was panicking.
No, it's good. It's a good way to throw Miguel off the scent, and be plausible as well, because how's he going to check?
Indeed, yeah, unless he's going to go digging up graves in the daytime, which we obviously see Dexter do later on in the season. Maybe
he learned all this from his time on 6 Feet Under.
I thought it was 6 Foot Under, but then as I was going to say that, I was thinking, is that the Fit to Mildrew program?
Yeah, 6 Feet Under, not to be confused with 1 Foot in the Grave.
That's it.
Two very, very different shows if you're looking for suggestions on very serious dramas or very light-hearted British comedies.
I tried watching 1 Foot in the Grave a few months ago, because I'm trying to find a half an hour program that I can have with my dinner that's really light-hearted. But I struggled with it. I don't know. It just felt really dated.
Yeah, is it right? So I've not seen it for a long time.
Yeah, I've only watched a few episodes. I remember watching that as a kid with my parents and my grandparents. So yeah, I knocked it on the head.
We'll maybe have to do a sitcoms episode in future weeks here on the Rating Room. We'll note that down as a future idea.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Back to Dexter. And Dexter and Rita are actually at the beach, and Dexter spots the bloke from the supermarket again. So he's surveying the area and taking photos. And I thought this was funny because Dexter and Rita then go to yoga together, and it's a pregnant mothers yoga session as well. So it's not a normal yoga session; it's a mothers to be session.
Yes, I guess, or couples, not couples to be, that would be wrong. Parents to be, that would make sense. We're soon introduced to Miss Wolf, who is acting as a defence lawyer, and she'll become prevalent throughout the series. But then Dexter goes to a cafe and restaurant, sits at a table where earlier mentioned paedophile is sat, and they have a bit of a chat. But he technically doesn't fit his code, does he, at this point? But he does warn him to stay away from Asta. But I did write a quote that Dexter said when he says to him, "We are what we are." And I think obviously Dexter is referring to the fact that he is a monster, a killer. But he's just gone to a paedophile and said, "We are what we are." So now this Cheerios man, or whatever his name is going to think that Dexter's a pedo as well.
That is a good point, Andy. And it was a bit frustrating where he was saying he doesn't fit the code. I think like, why? Surely you can break the code. And Andy, again, you know when you said about introduced to the defense lawyer, this is the episode that I remembered about her. So I remember how this season finishes, and I remember Miguel doing something and not telling Dexter, but I couldn't remember until we were introduced to her. I remembered, yes, that's who Miguel kills later on. So it's one of these ones where, you know, we said before, we've seen all the seasons. I've only ever seen Dexter once throughout, but I think I've seen seasons 1 and 2 more than once or twice. So, you know, it's one of those things where I remember, like we said with James Bond, when certain things happen, it kind of triggers those memories again. So we see Dexter and Miguel meeting under the bridge as well. And Miguel gives Dexter the shirt he was wearing when they met in the garden at Freebo's hideout. And again, I remembered this, that it wasn't the blood when it happened. Do you remember? Did it prompt you?
No, not at all. Not at all.
So it kind of ruined it, because I was thinking like, oh, I remember that little twist which comes later on. Because when you watch it the first time round, I think it's quite a clever thing, the twist, because even in episode 3, Miguel is kind of starting to play Dexter, isn't he? It's not like later on where they start actually going against each other. It's already at this point in time where Miguel is either playing Dexter or keeping something back so then he can play Dexter or manipulate him at a later time.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic looking back, because Dexter at this point still thinks he's in control, but he probably doesn't realise that he's not as in control as he thinks he is.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a scene later on where Deb's at a bar and the CI is on stage singing, and he's wrote a song about her. I believe the song is called Puta Flaca Mala, which, if my Spanish is correct, is something along the lines of skinny mean bitch.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because Deb turns around to a woman dancing and says something like, "He wrote this song about me," or something like that, and then they have a laugh.
Yeah, because she's completely clueless what it means.
Yeah.
It's brilliant, yeah. And then Dexter goes to the pedo's house, sees him looking at photos of Asta on his laptop, so strangles him. But what I really liked about this was the fact that earlier Rita had asked him to pick up some milk on the way home, so he just takes some from his fridge. That was a nice touch.
I thought that was really funny. And then when he gets back home, back to Rita's, I did then start thinking, what about if the milk is already open? Does Dexter say, "Oh, I took a swig in the car"? Do you know what I mean? Like he brought the milk home to Rita's place, and it's like, "Oh, got some milk." I did think that shows him quite cold and practical about it. And also, he decides to be the father to the kid, which I think is a nice little ending, and he's taking responsibility for this.
Yes, Dexter's going to be a daddy after all. There's lots of kind of flashbacks and you wouldn't call them dream sequences, but you know when he's speaking to Harry, isn't he? In kind of the voices in his head sort of thing, and then that helps him come to the decision. And we have one kill that we can log for Dexter in episode 3, so let's move on to episode 4, which is titled All in the Family.
And The episode involves a very, very awkward opening because Dexter Rita is about to say something to the kids, and he just makes a blunt, fumbled announcement about the baby to the kids, and then he does a proposal. And it couldn't go any worse, even if he tried. He just doesn't get it, does he?
No, it was bad. It was really bad. But there was a funny bit where they asked Cody and Esther, would they rather have a brother or a sister? And Cody said he wants a puppy.
Just what you need, a newborn and a puppy as well. So Ramon, so we were saying that a few episodes ago, Ramon is a hothead. And he's very much a loose cannon here. And he's actively looking for Freebo. And Miguel wants to share the secret, but Dexter, rightly so, is against this. And Miguel does agree with Dexter, doesn't he? He kind of like... he kind of agree, he's happy that... I think Dexter said it's not his secret to share, or something like that, doesn't it? I can't remember the exact words. But Miguel seems to kind of... not so much. What is it? He's happy with Dexter. It must be really hard if you think of Miguel, because you've got your brother. You could put him at ease if he knew about what happened to Freebo, couldn't he? But he doesn't. He can't do it because he doesn't want to kind of betray Dexter. But we know he's betraying him already because of the shirt situation that we find out later on.
Yeah, and it goes back to the earlier point I made around Dexter being too risky, because there was, how can he trust Miguel to not open up to somebody else? And now Miguel wants to bring someone in. It's things have got to change. But let's switch gears slightly, because Quinn is still around. Seems to have a bit of a way with a particular witness. I think the witness is actually the girlfriend of a murder victim of a case they're investigating.
That's yeah. Or fiance, girlfriend, fiance, yeah.
Or maybe he's just a ladies' man, but he certainly has a softer side to him that certainly takes Deb and others by surprise.
Yeah, he's kind of like I would say like a horse whisperer, but for witnesses. A witness whisperer, because he's definitely showing his more gentle side, which you haven't really seen up until this point.
No, it adds another layer to Quinn, and also questions, well, what exactly is going on?
Yeah, so Rita is struggling with hormones as well, and she's at work, and she clashes with this customer who's moaning about wanting a honeymoon suite, or she might even be in a honeymoon suite, and essentially they've got actually the best room available. They wanted a sea view, a sunset view, as well. I'm trying to think where it's sunset or sunrising then. And Rita she has a bit of a moan to the customer, and her manager takes her to one side and gives a bit of a dressing down, and Rita loses her job. Yeah,
I thought that was a bit harsh, actually. I mean, the customer deserved it. Maybe, did she call her a bitch?
She did, yeah.
She did.
Yeah.
So, maybe that's a bit too far, but I don't think it's worth getting sacked over. That seems a bit harsh. Just a warning is enough.
Because the manager does say, it didn't seem like this was an isolated incident, did it? But I don't know if she has done something to that level before, because her line manager says something like, I've got to comp that room now, or something like that. It's not great. And then I thought this was really, really clever, because Dexter starts manipulating Ramon at the bar, and he does these little subtle kind of prods just to get him really worked up. So he's really manipulative, Dexter is as well. And I can't remember if it was later on that I made a note, Andy. If not, I'm going to say it now. I don't think Dexter's really that likable in this season.
I tend to agree. He's a bit of a knob, isn't he?
He is, because because this, like Ramon, I know he's a bit of a hothead, but he is innocent, and Dexter is trying to not ruin his life, but he's trying to put Ramon in situations. So I did feel sorry for Ramon, but I like I said, I can't remember if it's now or later on. I either wrote it down or I was thinking like, oh, I know he's the main character, Dexter is, but this season he's not very likable. So moving on, while that's happening with Dexter and Ramon, we've got Laguetta, and she goes to talk to Miguel as well about the witness and the evidence that clears him. And this is another case that is happening, and this is kind of like the beginning of that kind of subplot with Laguetta and Wolf as well. And I can't remember the person's name, but it's Batista, isn't it? And finds out that they've got this evidence to... Is it Batista or is it Quinn? I think it's Batista, isn't it,
Batista,
Andy? Yeah. So, yes, Laguetta goes and talks to Miguel.
Yeah, there's... I think as it goes along, I think we find out that at the very least, Miguel's not done his due diligence on this case, and then, it kind of unravels from there. But things are unraveling at home for Rita. Obviously, she's lost the job. Now she's suffering from sickness. She's sat next to the toilet eating crackers, as you do as a pregnant lady, I suppose. I wouldn't know, but she's suffering, bless her. Meanwhile, Deb is asking Anton about Quinn, because she's trying to figure out, is he a good guy, is he a bad guy? She's still not sure. I are on a case trying to get information, but she doesn't want to be a rat, but then Quinn's acting in a way that's making her suspicious. So she goes to the CI, Anton, to ask him information, and it feels like they're getting close to each other, or certainly Deb's getting close to him.
Yeah, and Andy, I found this really frustrating because I remembered the outcome of what happens to Anton, and I was thinking, Deb, you're not helping yourself here. Why are you doing this? First season, you fell in love with the ice truck killer, you got engaged. Second season, you get it on with Lundy, and you also have the relationship with the wannabe author as well, and she just seems to be really unlucky in love. So why are you getting close to your CI? And Andy, go back to your comment about morning sickness and eating crackers. When my wife was pregnant with our first child, she used to like sucking on sponges. That was her little funny pregnancy thing, like cleaning sponges. She would just sit there with a little bowl of water, sucking on a sponge.
That's a new one on me, I must admit.
Yeah. Well, when I tell some people about it at work, apparently it's one of like the common thing. People have heard that before. Because she went off of Chinese food, which was devastating for me because that's my favourite takeaway. So during the whole pregnancy, the 9 months, I don't believe we had a takeaway. Or we had it once and it just made her feel sick. So it took her ages to go back to takeaway. But I digress, Andy. Now, Batista nearly makes a massive mistake with his undercover escort. Now, thankfully, the undercover cop gets him out before it's too late. So she's looking after her colleagues there. I thought that was quite a nice thing to do. Now, Masuka, he tries to bribe his colleagues with donuts and tickets for his keynote. So he's trying to do the Dexter trick here, and it does seem to play on the cliche that police officers love donuts as well. And Quinn gives Masuka some advice, and shortly afterwards, he offers Debs a cream-filled donut, and she says something to Masuka, but he was being totally innocent. And Andy, I'm watching another TV program at the moment, and the actor that plays Masuka in Dexter is briefly in the other TV program that I'm watching. I'm not really seeing him in anything else, and he's obviously a lot older because it's only just come out.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I can't remember seeing him in anything else either, to be honest. I'm not sure how innocent he was when he asked her if she wanted a cream-filled donut. But maybe he's just that much of a dirty perv that it's just natural to him now. But Batista goes back to the cop who was posing as the escort. Opens up to her, doesn't he? He says he's feeling lonely. He's very remorseful, has to be said. but clearly he's made a mistake and he feels terrible about it. Ramon is back, storms into the police office, the police department, and has a real go at Laguetta and Batista. And it turns out that Dexter has been feeding him false evidence.
Yeah, so again, not nice guy Dexter. This might be the bit when I was thinking about earlier, where I was saying he's a bit of a in this season. And it looks like Fiona was a killer after all, because they're doing this little experiment with this blood splatter analysis, and it must be a really fascinating job, that. And it looks like Fiona is good at Photoshop as well, because you find out she's manipulated the artwork as well. And Quinn is really good actually at working on her as well, because he manages to kind of tease this out. And at the same time, you see Dexter on like the monitor. He's watching the monitor, like the feed from the interview room, and he's just listening intently. And Fiona, while Fiona's talking, and he's like taking pointers really, because Debbie's having a bit of a moan, isn't she, about Quinn, and he's just so fascinated by Fiona about like the things that she's saying. And then this is where we got Laguetta, and she goes to talk to Worf, and not from Star Trek, by the way, and starts talking about the evidence that clears this bloke. And then Worf, I thought this was good because she's single, divorced at least once. I believe she's divorced twice, but she likes to indulge because she's got a glass of scotch and she has some cakes, and I thought that was quite nice. Because, Andy, it's great being an adult because you can eat what you want, can't you? If you don't worry about your waistline when you want.
Yeah, you mentioned Quinn getting the confession from Fiona. Deb's not happy about it because she unwittingly played bad cop in this situation, so she feels like Quinn's played her a little bit. And then Dexter goes to see Miguel, and he's had a change of heart, and he says they should tell Ramon. And again, this is another huge risk. I know what Dexter's playing at this point based on what he's done so far, but it's still a massive risk, isn't it?
It is, and it's really clever by Dexter because he's kind of done these little, like I said, kind of earlier on, these little prods, and he's kind of marinated Ramon to this point now, and he's got to this point where he's so good at manipulating people, not just Ramon. And they go to the bar together, and you think, yeah, it's gonna happen. But Ramon is drunk, his back is up, and as Dexter is leaving, he just has a little word with the bouncer, doesn't he, about Ramon as well. So he's always manipulating, and you gotta feel sorry for Ramon. Really, his brother's been murdered. It feels like the cops aren't doing their jobs. It feels like Miguel is not taking the same kind of interest that Ramon is taking into finding the younger brother's killer. So I do feel a little bit sorry for Ramon there. And then we see Dexter and Miguel having this moment as well on the beach, and they're definitely forming a friendship. And you could even argue maybe they're even brothers as well, because I think they start talking about that. And Andy, my last point I just want to make for this episode is Dexter does this big talk where he's expressing himself to Rita and the kids, and the kids are there to witness it as well. And he gets everyone on side. So that little where he's observing Fiona has really worked as well. And he's just acting, isn't he? He's just essentially reading from a script.
That's very much what it feels like, but it works because Rita finally says yes to him.
A happy moment for all. And that means in this episode, there were 0 kills. And I think, yep, that's the first episode this season, Andy, where there's not been a kill. Episode 5, Turning by My Knees. And it kicks off, and it turns out, so we've had a bit of a, is it a time jump? Rita is 9 to 10 weeks pregnant. And also, their friendship is really blossoming between Dexter and Miguel because they're playing golf. And Miguel then starts telling Dexter about a wife killer.
He does indeed. You could say that Miguel has a victim teed up for Dexter. Little golfing joke there for those of you in the know. The thing that shocked me most about this was that Dexter is a lefty.
I thought exactly the same thing, Andy. I didn't make a comment here, but because I didn't want to show myself up, Andy, because I was thinking like, is he always being left-handed? And I've just never noticed it. But yeah, that was, it's because they're on the, not a driving range, is it? Well, it is, but it's like on a stand, isn't it? And they're both facing each other. So yeah, that's the first time I've noticed he's a lefty. And things are awkward as well. There's a lunch date with Miguel and others, and they start talking about buying a new house and selling Dexter's apartment. So he's going to lose his bachelor pad.
Yeah, he doesn't react well to this news, but I'm sure he'll get back on track eventually. Speaking of back on track, Masuka is a proper professional now. He's wearing a shirt and a tie. He's not cracking jokes. And I think Quinn's talk with him in the last episode really shocked him. It's really hurt his feelings, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. Masuka's he's playing it by the book now, and that talk Andy's mentioned, Quinn seemed to has done the trick. But also in terms of what's happening in the office, Ramon is the sheriff liaison officer now for the Miami PD. So that he's kind of got that position to kind of get himself involved now with the Freebo case. And Batista also meets up with the undercover escort, and he asks her out for a date. And Dexter as well. This is a new side of Dexter as well. I think we've seen, because he's being really firm with Rita about the houses, and they do have a mini argument here.
Yeah, but I'm on Rita's side. Dexter's being a bit of a dick, isn't he?
He is, yeah. He's got. This is, I think, one of the rare times that we see outside influences having an impact on Dexter. He's struggling to keep all the plates spinning, isn't he? It's getting to him now.
I think his main focus, or his main concern, is that he won't be able to kill anymore. That's what the feeling I get anyway.
Yeah, because how's he going to explain going out all the time to do his murders? Now, Dexter, talking about heading out, actually, Dexter is about to head out, and Miguel arrives. However, Miguel doesn't go out and with Dexter because he's busy. So this is where he's going to go out and about. And you think, oh, is Miguel going to go out with Dexter? And he doesn't go out with him. Out to sea, I mean.
He's very much hinting that he wants to, but Dexter just has none of it. But Dexter needs to work on his people skills, I think, because it's very, very off-puttish.
Definitely there. And Masuka proves that the cases are not related as well.
Yeah, this is I don't know if you'd call it a come to Jesus moment, but it's like it's one of those moments where it's like he's back, and the quote that lets you know that he's back is when he says, and I quote, "Science is one cold-hearted bitch with a 14-inch strap-on."
A great quote, and kind of a little throwback to what me and Andy were talking off air there as well.
let's not go into that.
But moving on swiftly, Ramon isn't a happy bunny as well. So it's being proven that his sheriff liaison officer role isn't really needed now because the cases are not related. So he has to go back. And Rita starts to bleed at a house viewing as well, and she's rushed to the hospital. And later on, she's with Miguel, Sylvia, the doctors. Deb turns up as well, so it's quite hectic there.
It is, and meanwhile, Dexter's nowhere to be found. He's on the boat. He's in this. He's in the room of the wife killer, Ethan Turner, I believe his name is. But he's got to be quick because the sea taxi leaves in an hour, the last one of the night. But he still finds time to do a bit of chit chat. So priorities and all that. Elsewhere, Wendell, who's I think he's a 15-year-old kid, isn't he? Who's linked to Freebo somehow, is being watched. And I thought at this point, has Deb got him killed? Because he's going to die, isn't he? I didn't remember that he did, but when I saw him being watched, I'm like, he's going to die. Deb's got him killed.
Yeah, yeah. It's I didn't remember like some of the subplots here, so I didn't remember this bit. But yeah, this is interesting. And later on, we see Deb goes to Anton's apartment, but a woman answers the door. So it's here's a little bit of skirt, and Dexter then arrives at the hospital. So he finally picks up, listens to his messages, and the baby is fine, so that's okay. But she's obviously very upset. She's being on her own. Well, she's had Miguel and Sylvia, but it's not to say she's not being with Dexter. And then they start making plans for the wedding date. So they've got through their issues in this episode.
Yeah, and we bring things to a close with Miguel talking to Dexter, and he's probing him about the cruise ship. And I think at this point, Miguel says he sees who Dexter is, and he's proud of him. So maybe he's got an ally after all. We shall see as we move on to episode 6. But before that, let me just to confirm, there is one kill in episode 5. But episode 6 is titled Si se puede, if my Spanish is correct.
Now, Dexter and Miguel are sea fishing, and Miguel is probing Dexter again. And he's trying to find out about the bloke that Dexter killed on the cruise ship.
Yeah, I wondered whether this was a genuine questioning or whether this was some sort of test from Miguel. It was the vibes were just a little bit off to me.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely probing, and Deb is upset about Wendell Evans being murdered as well by the Skinner. And later on, we see Deb goes to see Anton. And they're continuing to get closer and closer as well.
She's sharing too much, I think, which is a common theme in the Morgan family. It just seems at the minute between them. I've not wrote this note down. I'm not sure if you've referred to this, but they're kind of putting 2 and 2 together in the police, and they're thinking that maybe Ramon is the Skinner, which is a bit of a leap, but they're starting to try and connect these dots, even though they're not necessarily fully connecting.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. They're grasping at straws, aren't they?
Yeah, it's certainly taking many, many twists and turns. But back to Dexter. He's got a possible next victim for killing, but this victim is in a Supermax prison. Miguel wants in on this. And Dexter's he's doing it in such a way where he's basically trying to manipulate Miguel, isn't he? So he's almost like he's saying, yeah, let's kill this next victim, but purposely giving him a victim that he thinks Miguel is going to say no to because it's not possible. But Miguel doesn't react how Dexter expected, so he's kind of played a bit of an own goal there, hasn't he?
Yes, and I think, is this the bit where he says that this prisoner was on Dexter's top 10 or wish list?
So something along those lines. But I think it was one of those where Dexter would have no interest in going after him because he's in prison. But switching gears again, I mean, we go from prison to hospital. Camilla is dying of terminal lung cancer. Dexter's not aware of this. He goes to hospital to see her. I noted that he seemed genuinely rattled by the news, which surprised me because of his lack of compassion for other people. But he does seem quite upset at this news.
He does, and Deb has a different view at all. So it is interesting because, like Andy says, Dexter does seem to be taken by Camilla dying, and Deb doesn't seem that interested. But getting back to Miguel has this plan for the prisoner, and he will arrive in Miami tomorrow. So he's already started this plan without talking to Dexter. And Dexter's plan to discourage Miguel obviously isn't working. Now, Batista is approached by an escort who wants a ride, and this is just so blatantly obvious. And he gives her some money for a taxi instead, and you will find out it was a test by the undercover cop, and Batista knows that as well. Now, jumping back to Miguel, Miguel gives the prisoner the key to the cuffs, and he makes a comment to say, can you essentially tell your friends to stop threatening my my wife or kids or something. So he's quite good. It feels like he's making it feel like he's being pressured into doing this, which is obviously a good cover story for the prisoner. Now, it doesn't go to plan because the guards are alerted, but they do, as in Dexter and Miguel, manage to bundle the prisoner into the car and leave the car park. And going back to Andy's previous comments as well, Dexter is taking more and more risk in this season.
Yeah, this was a very close call so early on as well, but they seem to get away with it. Meanwhile, Deb is continuing to investigate Ramon because she fancies him as the Skinner. She witnesses him knocking out this guy and putting him in the boot of his car. She follows him to this warehouse place, and Ramon's questioning the man that he kidnapped and torturing. He's certainly doing some tactics that are very underhand. I think I've never seen this before, but some kind of like, has he got like a pop bottle or soda or something, and he's basically shaking it and then putting it up his nose, which just...
Yeah, I've not seen that one. No.
I've never seen that, but it looks pretty grim. But he's got issues, he's got anger problems, but he's not the Skinner. And then we're finally going to get the moment where Dexter and Miguel kill together. Dexter's got him ready, tells Miguel where to meet him. Miguel arrives, but it's not the same place that Dexter is at. So Dexter's kind of played him a little bit. He's just not ready to share yet, is he?
He's not yet. And that means in this episode there was one Dexter kill. And it leads us nicely on to episode 7, which is easy as pie. Now, Dexter is dreaming about Miguel being present at a killing as well. And we see Dexter going to visit Camilla again. And she gives Dexter a box of photos, so some memorabilia. And Ramon does get a deal to go free, but he has to give up his badge and the gun. So surely now that's going to get Ramon off of Dexter's back, and he can hopefully just kind of move on now.
You would hope so, but something tells me it's not going to be so simple. But Dexter's got other things to worry about, including he needs a list of guests for the wedding, and he manages to come up with Deb as the only guest at this point, which I thought was quite amusing. On the Skinner case, that takes a bit of a turn because Batista wants to use Anton as bait, and Deb's not particularly happy about this.
No, she's not. And going back to golfing, this is where I made my comment, Andy, playing left-handed. So you picked that up an episode ahead of me, actually. And Miguel mentions killing Wolf, but Dexter isn't keen, as she doesn't meet the code. But he will have a little investigation into Wolf to see if there's anything about her, and does she meet the code later on. Now, Camelia says she's got another month, and she's really unhappy about this. Actually, you would think, if you're given another month, you'd be happy, but she just wants to die. She's in pain. She feels she's got no dignity as well, so she's really struggling, and she asks Dexter to kill her, and she mentions about Harry's code. So what has Harry been saying to Camilla? Going back to Anton, Deb tells Anton that he's being used as bait for the Skinner, and there's more flirting happening now between these two.
Yeah. There's a lot going on for a lot of different characters in this, which is kind of why we're flitting around from place to place. But Sylvia and Rita are having a conversation. Sylvia tells Rita that Miguel's never home. He's in a dark place. And they really just start comparing notes on their ex-boyfriends and ex-husbands, don't they? It becomes a bit of a bitch fest, I guess you could call it. And it's all about drugs and women, isn't it? So, they're not going to come out of this looking good. And at this point, the undercover escort, the female cop from earlier, tells Batista she just wants to be friends. So, he tried, but it doesn't quite work out for him.
Yeah, close but no cigar there for Batista. Now, Worf gives Legueta some high-level thoughts about Miguel and like the things that he's done, and like talk about unethical procedures and stuff. Now, Dexter stays in the briefing room while Wolf and Miguel are negotiating to it. He's loving this backwards and forwards, and obviously Miguel has set this up because he wants Dexter to see what Wolf is like, and hoping to kind of make Dexter want to kill her. And then as part of this negotiation, it's to do this Albert Chong that is being wanted, and it gets very, very heated in there. Now, swinging back round to Batista, he does share a kiss now with the vice cop, so she's let her guard down, and even though she's been banging on about being friends, this is why men have difficulty understanding women, Andy. Because, like, you know, she's gone from, I don't know if it's necessarily cold, but the messages that she's put out there is just completely different now. So it's very difficult for poor Batista. And that last point, before I pass over to Andy, is Camilla knows about Dexter's secret brother, and that he was the ice truck killer. So she mentioned that she knows about his mom as well.
Yeah, she knows quite a bit, doesn't she? We see a different side to Miguel on a couple of occasions here. One is when Sylvia accidentally drops something in the kitchen and he kind of snaps at her a little bit, doesn't he? But then, when Dexter tells him he can't get on board with Miguel wanting to kill Wolf, he snaps at Dexter. And it's the first signs of genuine tension between the two. And it's a bit of an eye-opening scene for Dexter, isn't it, at this point?
It is, yeah. I think it is a bit surprising. And Dexter points out to Masuka that Albert Chong looks like him, and then Masuka's about to say no and like kind of say you're racist, and then he realizes there is a bit of resemblance there.
Yeah, that's funny.
It is funny. It is funny. And Deb then starts putting the pieces together as well for the Skinner suspect, and figures out that the Skinner is a tree trimmer. So that is, like I said, I remembered about the Skinner. So when you started seeing the discarded branches or whatever you call those bits on those trees, it kind of, you kind of saw that when you're rewatching it.
Yeah, it's starting to come together now, and the target is thinning, isn't it? You know, they're homing in on whoever this Skinner guy is. A couple of other quick points. Dexter's continuing with his guest list, and he puts Donut Guy on there because, you know, why not? And by Donut Guy, I mean the guy he gives a donut to who we can't remember the name of. And then we see Dexter takes Rita with him to go and see Camilla. I think that this may be the first time that Camilla's met Rita. It sounds like she's heard about her, but not actually met her. But it's quite a touching moment. You know, and Camilla's obviously very happy for Dexter and the life that he's living. And on this other side of the Morgan family, Deb finally gets it on with Anton. I mean, this is really, really complicated love life that she leads. I would say it was pretty obvious that it was going to happen, but I don't know. It just doesn't feel like it works for me.
I agree. I do feel it was, I wouldn't say forced, but kind of... you needed to move that story along, so you needed to get those two kind of falling for each other. Now, Miguel tells Dexter he was right about Wolf, so thankfully that must be the end of that now, and they can both move on. However, they do have a little argument, but they do remain friends. Now, Dexter then asks Miguel to be his best man, which is just totally... out of the blue and typical Dexter, I think this is. Now, Dexter does drug Camilla by spiking the cake, and it is the perfect pie. So he whispers to her that he killed his brother, and she goes peacefully to her heaven, I guess, because she's very Catholic, isn't she?
Yeah, it's one of the few times that Dexter is being kind with his killing, and it's a bit of a stretch to get there, but you know, finally gets there in the end. And I'm assuming the one kill that Dexter has is Camilla. Are we counting Camilla as the kill?
I believe, yes. I don't have my list with me, Andy.
It is a murder. Just thinking back on the notes, I don't think he kills anyone else. So yeah, that's that's the kill for episode 7. So moving on to episode 8, titled "The Damage a Man Can Do."
Sorry, Andy, I will just check in my my notes because I do have the list of kills separately, and yes, that is the one. Sorry, Andy. So jumping back into this episode, Miguel identifies another victim for them. So he's kind of got this appetite now, which is quite worrying because we don't know exactly the frequency of Dexter kills, because we don't know between episodes how much time elapses, because he doesn't kill a person in every episode. But Miguel does have this appetite now. But Dexter says he will think about it.
Yeah, I think he needs to think a bit longer. Now, one note I made here is the fact that they share a pizza. Nothing wrong with that. It's a plain pizza. This really confirms to me that they are psychopaths. Plain pizza, come on. You're not 12 years old.
What's your pizza choice then, Andy?
As much meat as possible.
Like mine's the complete opposite. I love veggie. I'm not a vegetarian, but I love veggie. I know you don't like veg.
I'm the exact opposite of a vegetarian.
My daughter likes margarita pizzas. And my son has, like you, lots of meat on his ones as well.
It's the only way to do it. It really is. But speaking of psychopaths, Rita, she's very hormonal, isn't she?
She is. The poor Finn going through pregnancy. She is suffering. And we find out Deb has stayed the night at Anton's as well, and she discovers his stash of drugs. I think it's in like a cereal box. Leguetta invites Batista as a +1 to some kind of police do, but Batista turns her down. And Dexter mentions the code to Miguel for the first time, but he doesn't go into much detail, though.
No, he's slowly opening up to him, isn't he? Meanwhile, Leguetta and Wolf are getting closer, and they go to this police convention together. Then we have one of the tree trimmers give some info to Deb and Quinn about Mario. Quinn also tells Deb that Anton isn't actually an official CI. And Deb's not happy about this, as you can imagine. But Quinn has figured out that Deb's sleeping with him. So this is another thing that's taken a very complicated twist.
Yeah, it's not great. And the relationship between Deb and Quinn isn't great in this season. Now, Dexter and Miguel break into the next victim's home, and Dexter's dad warns him about sharing the code with Miguel. I like these. Like you said, it's not necessary. It's like a dream kind of scene. I do like these. And Dexter is then getting together like a starter kit for Miguel, and that's very nice thing to do. Best buddies there. And Dexter and Miguel then follow the blow, but someone says hello to Miguel, or he said something, and Miguel calls it off for now, though, which is disappointing for Miguel. And then jumping back to Anton and Deb, Anton is a no-show for their morning date. So I wonder what that means for poor Anton.
It's certainly not looking good at this point, is it? But Mario seems to be prime suspect. He's brought in to the station, having been apprehended. Dexter and Miguel have another talk about this would-be victim and how they're going to move forward. This is not going away, is it?
No, not at all. It's not great at all. And Mario, he gets scared because one of them mentioned about George King, and they then start moving on to investigate him now because of how scared Mario gets. And Miguel and Dexter subdue this bloke, and we see him on the kill table, and it's like one that kind of rotates. And it's interesting because Miguel thanks Dexter for letting him in, for doing it. And then Miguel kills a bloke, but he doesn't hesitate or anything, does he? He is quite quick in terms of, you think, is he going to have second thoughts or anything like that? But he doesn't. He just plunges the knife from memory into the bloke.
He pretty much does, yeah. And Dexter watches on, and it's the first time he's ever watched it happen. So it's a different experience for him. Very, very good scene. Now, what Miguel does do that he shouldn't do is he goes to take a trophy. But Dexter stops him, rightly so. And we then see that Deb has gone to Anton's place because, he didn't turn up for the day. He's not been seen since. And she notices that the trees have been trimmed. So things are looking very, very bleak for Anton.
Yeah, dun dun dun. And Dexter gives Rita the engagement ring. And she likes it, so that's all positive. And the episode ends with Miguel arriving at Wolf's place and going in. So, very ominous there. And 0 kills for Dexter because he didn't kill the bloke. It was Miguel. So 0 kills. And now, moving on, it's episode 9, About Last Night.
Yeah, so it turns out Miguel's only just got home after the previous night's killing. We obviously know that he's been to see Wolf, but Dexter doesn't. And Dexter, I think, kind of accidentally drops him in it a bit, doesn't he? Or is it Rita that mentions that Dexter got back at a certain time, but Miguel didn't? So, it's not looking good. But then what that does is that causes Dexter to suspect that Miguel's been up to no good. Has a chat with him. Miguel says something about he was really wired, so he just needed to go somewhere afterwards. I think he mentions a bar or something. But Dexter knows that this particular bar closes at 2 a.m, so that doesn't line up with why he's only just arrived back home an hour or so earlier.
Yeah, it's the beginnings of the cracks in this friendship now. And Anton is missing. The cops are trying to figure out what's happened. And we cut to a scene with Anton being skinned by Jules King. Very gruesome. And Jules King is then later, he leaves Anton and he heads back to his place, and Deb and Quinn is waiting there, and he's brought into the station for questioning as well. And then we see Dexter goes to Wolf's place and finds blood using this special chemical stuff and UV light. So he's not closing in on Miguel, is he? But he's obviously found out what Miguel's been up to.
Yeah, it very much seems like he's putting the pieces together. And I think even Harry helps him out, doesn't he, with putting these pieces together with some of the inner monologue stuff. So Dexter goes off to the cemetery to go digging, finds Wolf, and he's shocked by it, confronts Miguel at lunch. Miguel doesn't deny it, though. So it's one of those that he knows, but does he know that he knows that he knows? But they both know, but they both don't know, and it's the plot thickens very much so. But a mistake was made, wasn't it? Because Wolf's body is later discovered. Now how could that have happened? She's been beaten, she's been strangled, she's been stabbed. Laguerta obviously doesn't take that well. Dexter, a bit smug. I think he's acting all wrong, and he's probably poking Miguel unnecessarily, and Miguel's not happy about this at all. So this is starting to take a bit of a sinister turn now.
Yeah, Dexter's, for me, he's too smug here. He's not helping this situation at all. He's antagonizing Miguel, really. Now, Dexter goes back to work to test the blood on the shirt that Miguel returned. And he's starting to realize that Miguel has just been feeding him lies. And then we see Miguel goes to talk to George King alone and turns off the camera. So I remembered this, but it's, they're both kind of putting things in motion to go against each other. And then we see Quinn drives the car through the locked door, which was a tad overkill in my opinion. Surely they could have just shot the lock instead. I don't know why they had to drive a car in there. Don't have expenses. Doesn't he have? I'm assuming it's a police car, not his car. Why would you do it if it's his car?
Couple of big kicks might have been enough.
Yeah, indeed. And then it closes the episode where Dexter finds out the blood isn't human, but it's bovine, and so. Dun, dun, dun. But like I said, I remember this anyway. But I am sure when I first watched it, I thought that was a good reveal.
Yeah, it was. This episode in particular really kind of cements that it is Dexter versus Miguel that is going to happen now. Because there's the body find, there's the bovine blood, and there's earlier on in the episode, Rita has a bit of a pep talk with Miguel because obviously Rita and Sylvia have been talking about him, and when Rita's speaking to Dexter later on, or Miguel's speaking to Dexter later on, he's using the same words. He's using, he makes reference to insight and what a wise person and how you've just saved my life, things of that nature, and it's like those kind of things all just kind of come together, and it's like a light bulb moment, isn't it, for Dexter? So it's on. It is on. No kills in this episode, but I've got a feeling that's not going to be the case for much longer as we get into episode 10, which is called Go Your Own Way. Now, there's still a bit of pretense going on because Dexter is out for dinner with Miguel and the ladies. Dexter's put his foot in it, though, with Deb and Anton. Still as awkward as ever. I think, is this where he basically says something about the wedding, doesn't he, and Anton being a plus one?
I think he invites him, doesn't he?
Something along those lines, but he's definitely put his foot in it. Dexter later on goes to see Miguel and mentions the possible witness, and they've come to an agreement on how they're going to move forward. Dexter thinks it's all behind him now, it's all sorted.
Yeah, and also then, so changing the kind of the direction now, we cut to Batista, and his girlfriend has been beaten up. Obviously, his girlfriend is the vice cop. Now, Laguetta moans at Dexter about the key missing the relevant documentation, and Dexter is then worried that she's being manipulated by Miguel. So he's not as cool as he's been in this episode. Now, Anton hits Quinn in the police department as well after Quinn starts apologising about keeping him off the CI records because obviously Deb didn't tell Anton that. She mentioned it was something else, so this was news to Anton, and he doesn't take it well.
No, punching a policeman in a police station is probably not the smartest thing that's ever been done. Meanwhile, Miguel is trying to work his magic on Maria, getting her drunk, manipulating her. Dexter interrupts them quite hilariously, I think, but he just comes across as a bumbling fool to Maria. So it's well played. But then it gets worse because Sylvia turns up, and she mentioned Miguel wasn't home last Thursday, and then Sylvia storms off. Miguel has to leave, and as he's leaving, the car lights, the halogen lights, are blinding to Maria, and she thinks back to a comment that was made earlier, and she's starting to put some pieces together as well. Not only that, but Dexter goes to Miguel's office. I think he basically bribes the cleaner up, says to the cleaner, I want to get him a gift, I just want to see what books he's got, or something like that, and the cleaner thinks he's harmless, and he finds Wolf's ring that Miguel has taken as a trophy. We tried to do that in an earlier kill, and it was hidden there in the cigar box. It's quite funny because later on Miguel finds the cigar box has been opened slightly, so you think, hang on, what's going on here? And he sees a cleaner's note, a dry cleaner's for a pickup, and it's the shirt that he gave to Dexter with the blood on it.
I thought this was really good because originally, when Miguel was in his office and he noticed the cigarette box is open, I was thinking, how could Dexter be so careless? And then when I saw the note was in there, the cleaner's note, I was thinking, why is he antagonising Miguel? He don't need to. And then when it was the top with the blood stain, I just thought, It was I love that little sequence, but it was needlessly antagonizing Miguel there. Now, Miguel turns up at the police department, and they meet on the rooftop as well. And Miguel isn't happy at all. I thought there was going to be a fisty fight here, and someone is watching them on the roof as well. And it turns out it's George King, and Miguel has set Dexter up. And then we see the episode closes. Dexter is attacked and kidnapped. And just before we move on to the next episode, that means there's 0 kills in this episode. And the next episode is episode 11, and we're coming near the end now. And this one's called I Had a Dream.
Yeah, and we're straight into the next scene, continuing from the last episode. Dexter's in the boot of a car. He's kidnapped. He's scared. Seeing his dad. And, we see a lot of his dad in this series. But he's trying to basically... It's almost like a pep talk, isn't it? Saying, you've got to survive. You've got to get out of here. And then the car comes to a stop. He's managed to free himself from I think his hands are taped behind his back or something. So he manages to get loose, and he can hear the car come to a stop. So now he's ready to pounce. It's fight for survival now. The car boot opens, and bam, he hits the bloke. But it's Masuka. This is not a kidnapping at all. This is his bachelor party.
This was good because I totally didn't remember this bit, so I thought that was really good. And Dexter is suffering from a really bad hangover in the morning, and Rita comes to visit him with bagels. So that's nice of Rita.
It is, except he'd only arrived in the flat about 5 minutes earlier. I think it was. I don't think he'd been to sleep at all. I did want to. I'd made a note, and I've kind of skipped ahead a little bit, but. Miguel's there at the stag do, and he makes quite the speech. With it's very pointed, but he does it in such a way that everyone thinks he's being really nice about Dexter. But very, very well done.
We jumping back to Liguetta, and she's working through her thoughts regarding Miguel and Wolf as well. So she's playing things out, and then there's a joke that Dexter makes about their dad sleeping with a CI and Deb obviously sleeping with Anton, and it doesn't go down well. So he is still as clumsy as ever when it comes to interacting with other people.
Yeah, there's a funny scene where Batista comes in the room not long afterwards, and Deb says, "Blow me," and Batista just goes, "My sister never says that." Which I thought was amusing. But Dexter is following Miguel. Miguel's at a hotel, but Miguel sneaks off, so he follows him from the hotel. He's going to Liguetta's place for dinner.
So Andy, I just want to jump in here. I don't know if you've noticed this, but throughout the season, I noticed Miguel always seems to wear his work tie outside of work hours. So I don't know if you wear a tie. I wear a tie for work. As soon as I get home, I take my tie off. Where you see throughout this season, Miguel, he might loosen it a bit, but he's always wearing his tie when he's outside of work. So I just wanted to point that out.
No, I'm a jeans and t-shirt kind of guy. I wore shirt and trousers for a little while. You got to make an impression during a probationary period, but then after that, it. I'm already here. You're already paying me. Deal with it. Probably very unprofessional. I'll edit that out in some way. I'll make myself sound good. But yeah, back at the Guetta's and having dinner, she makes an excuse to go outside. I think she's left some beers in the car or something, but she manages to sneak into Miguel's car, and she's got some sticky tape and takes some samples of what she's hoping is fibres from the boot. She's onto him, isn't she? But Miguel is onto her as well.
Yeah, I thought this was brilliant because you think she's getting up a hand, but no, Miguel is all over her as well. And Miguel is notified that Liguetta is running a test against recent victims as well. And obviously, that's going to, cause a potential match with Wolf's evidence as well. And Liguetta finds out that the hair samples match. And then Dexter's just playing along with a theory. She calls him in and, he's playing along.
Yeah, there's some weird scenes here because Dexter's obviously outside LaGuetta's place. I don't think he's exactly well hidden. He's just kind of sat in his car across the road. He's not well hidden at all. But there is an interesting quote that I made from kind of his inner monologue, which is, Miguel probably thinks he's getting lucky. He's probably getting screwed. Which I thought was a nice quote. I will kind of, as a bit of a sidebar, because obviously the main story is Dexter and Miguel now, but there is stuff going on elsewhere. Masuka is sweet on Tammy, who helped organise the bachelor party, but and he has I think he has Batista run a background check on her, and Batista founds some minor crimes on there, and Masuka's absolutely over the moon with this news, because that means she's got issues, so she's not out of my league, which I thought was another very, very funny quote. But back to the main event, as it were. Dexter goes to Miguel's hotel room, figures out that tonight's the night. Miguel is going to kill Maria. But Miguel doesn't wear any clothing to hide his face. He's so well known and he can be easily seen. He's not ready for this, is he? He's not thought this kind of thing through.
Yeah, it does show. I think he's a bit, considering that he was spotted in the casino a few episodes ago, and he's just not taking any kind of precaution there. And Dexter, he does get Miguel. I thought this was really good, actually. And we see Dexter as Miguel on the kill table. I was a bit surprised with this, because we've still got one episode left. And Dexter does kill Miguel, but before he kills Miguel, he tells Miguel that Dexter killed his younger brother as well. So I thought this kind of big scene was going to happen in the last episode, in the season ending episode. So I was a bit surprised it was this one. And so he gets his man in this one, and I think it's a fitting end, isn't it? Because there's a bit of backwards and forwards between the two, and then he just kills him.
He does kill him, not in the way he would normally, and we'll touch on that in the next episode review, because coming up next is the season finale. But just to confirm, there is one kill. That is, of course, Miguel. Adios, amigo. So, episode 12, the final episode of season 3, is called Do You Take Dexter Morgan? And,
as Andy alluded to a few seconds ago, Dexter has dumped Miguel's body, and it gets discovered like in some kind of park or somewhere. And I was really surprised, and I was wondering why he did that. And we see Ramon confront Dexter at the crime scene, so Ramon is back. And yeah, why have you done that, Dexter? He's not being careful. He's done it deliberately, I suppose, because I suppose Miguel can't just disappear like that.
No, it's too high profile, so he's got to do it in such a way that it looks like somebody else did it. And, there's got the Skinner case ongoing, haven't they? So all makes sense. Now, we don't actually see the funeral of Miguel, but we do see the aftermath, and we find out that Dexter was actually thrown out of the funeral by Ramon. So I wonder exactly what had gone on there. That could be a good kind of bonus episode for the DVD, I wonder. I don't think they did that, but hypothetically it would be. And we find a bit of a revelation out about Rita. She has a card, I think it's from her mum, and she says something like third time lucky in relation to the wedding, but that would mean that she's been married twice before, not just the once.
Yeah, a bombshell there for Dexter. And also another slightly upsetting scene is Dexter goes back to his place and it's been broken into. And we find, obviously, it's Ramon, and Dexter's very nervous while the police is, reviewing and going through his room, and he's worried about his blood samples obviously being discovered. And Dexter then does a bit of research, a bit of Googling, and he confirms that Rita has been married twice because he's been searching the marriage records for her maiden name.
Yeah, it's all kicking off. Batista has a bit of a guilty conscience, and off to LaGuerta he goes, and he doesn't want anyone to find out, so he's going to own up to his incident earlier in the season when he was soliciting the comforts of a young woman, i.e. he went to see a hooker, and she turned out to be a cop. I think Maria handles it pretty well, and basically there's enough secrets going around, so let's just have one more. I think is basically her a way of dealing with it, or not dealing with it, as the case may be. But Dexter is being followed still. We're getting to the nut cutting time, as it were. He just assumes it's Ramon. Probably the Skinner, though, isn't it?
It is, yeah, probably. And later on, we see Ramon then pulls a gun on Dexter at this evening do, and he's tackled to the ground by Batista and Deb. They come from behind. And I thought this was an interesting scene because Dexter goes to visit Ramon in prison, and he eventually kind of talks him down, and he starts talking about his wife and kids and what's going to happen in the future and about the cycle repeating. And I can't remember the exact words. I don't know if you wrote it down, Andy, because I know you document some of the quotes. But he says something, doesn't he, about you don't need to kill a man to beat him, or along those lines, doesn't he?
Something like I didn't write the quote down for this one, but I did say that it was a bit of a heart-to-heart, and it reveals that the dynamic between the Prado brothers was not exactly as it seemed to be. And Ramon was not just, not the aggressive hothead that everyone thought he was. He was actually trying to protect Miguel in a lot of ways. So it was definitely things were not as they seemed. But that's Ramon in prison. He can stew on his thoughts and come out a better man, I'm sure. Someone who's not a better man, though, is George King, the Skinner, because he attacks and kidnaps Dexter. Not good timing, considering, he's supposed to be getting married any day now. But we do have some good news, finally, and that's Deb gets her shield. She's promoted to detective, finally, after 3 seasons. So, good for her.
Yeah, she obviously she was working in Vice, and she got moved into the department, and now she's got promotion, so not bad going in 3 seasons. However, Dexter is obviously having the opposite here, because he is on the kill table this time, so it's not looking good for Dexter. And Deb has given up on the case, so she can see Anton. So even though she's got the promotion, she what I can't remember what she says. What is the wording that she uses? Because she says she's relinquished. No, I can't remember what.
She's recusing herself. Isn't she? I think is the word.
Yeah. So and Andy, I just want to jump back to your point about Liguetta and taking the confession quite well from Batista. She's really changed over these 3 seasons, considering, we mentioned how flirty she was in season 1 with Dexter. She seems a very different person in this season.
She does, yeah. The flirtiness is gone, but there still seems to be some level of trust. I don't know if it's a full-on friendship at this point, but there's certainly a level of trust there. And it's quite interesting if you consider what happened in Series 2 with Dokes, and obviously how Dokes and Dexter interacted and stuff. And it's like she's never, she doesn't believe that Dokes did those things, but she never suspects Dexter. So there's a lot of underlying dynamics that can be analysed here, and I'm sure they will be as seasons roll on. But before that, Dexter's got a wedding to get to, so he needs to escape the Skinner. And he does manage to escape and kills him, but as he's killing it, he breaks his neck, doesn't he? If memory serves, he kind of throws himself off the table, breaks his neck, but then the cops arrive, so he's got to think quick. So he just throws the body out from, they're on like a mezzanine level, straight in front of the cop car, and the cop car rolls over it and kind of drags it along the floor. So it's an escape. He manages to get away with it without the cops seeing him, and I think the cops just assume that the cops were coming, so he killed himself. Took the coward's way out. So then the wedding is finally here. Dexter and Rita can live happily ever after, and it's quite it's a happy ending for sure, but there's still just a hint of what's the word I'm thinking of? There's a hint that there's something a bit sinister still to come, because blood drips down from his injured hand and lands on Rita's wedding dress as they're dancing. So it just gives you that sense that the story's not over yet. But a very good ending to a very good season, I have to say.
Yeah, and that means in episode 12 there was 1 kill. And that leads us nicely onto the rankings, doesn't it, Andy? Do you want to kick things off with the kill count?
Does indeed. So let's talk kills. So in season 3 we had 9 kills for Dexter, so an average of 0.75 kills per episode. So it's steadily going up. So we've got season 1 was 7 kills, season 2 was 8 kills, season 3 9 kills. So it's top of the pile.
Yeah, so it's Dexter's deadliest season so far. Now, jumping onto the main villains, and I say villains here because this is the first time that we've got 2 main villains. So in season 1 we had the Ice Truck Killer, season 2 we had Lila West, and the reason we've got 2 villains is because in season 2 Dokes, he wasn't a villain. He was obviously going against Dexter, but he wasn't a villain, so we didn't count Dokes as a villain. Now, let's get straight into it here. So we got Miguel Prada as the villain and Jules King as the Skinner. So with Jules King, I've put him in 4th place, so he goes into the bottom of the pile out of the 4 that we've got so far. By far the weakest main villain out of the 4 that we've got. He kind of like hangs around in the background. You see him cutting some trees down. You see his victims, but you don't get much engagement from him really. And when Deb and Quinn are interviewing him, you can tell he's cold, but he's very polite, and he talks about respect as well. But he's definitely the weaker of the 4. Now, Miguel Prada, I thought was really, really good. And before watching this season, I was really looking forward to watching this one again because I remember Miguel Prada being a really good character. Now, I put him in number 2, spot 2, because for me, he's definitely better than Lila West. But for me, I just think Ice Truck Killer was the better villain, just because Ice Truck Killer is a serial killer. Miguel Prada, he does 2 kills that we know of. We're not aware of any other kills. We obviously had Wolf, and then the person, what's his name? The prisoner, isn't it? Is
the
kill.
The Nazi guy.
Yeah, yes, that's it. Yeah. So he's not I don't know, do you count 2 kills as a serial killer? What's the cut off for serial killers? But I think Miguel Prada was just slightly the weaker one with the Ice Truck Killer. I like the Ice Truck Killer. It's obviously Dexter's biological brother as well, so that kind of adds to the intrigue. He's kind of like in the background in a number of episodes, kind of teased in season 1, whereas Miguel Prada is pretty much in every episode at the forefront with Dexter. So very strong villain, but number 2 for me. What about you, Andy? How did you rank these ones?
So I agree with your ranking on the Skinner. I've also got George King in 4th place. I wouldn't say a clear 4th place because I think he's a very sadistic killer. Easy for me to say, but he is something of an ancillary character. He's not as a personal threat to Dexter as the other 3 have been so far, and it's that close personal connection that really puts Miguel top of the list for me. We saw in season 2 Lila got very close to Dexter. They were soulmates at one point, according to Lila at least. And I think even though the Ice Truck Killer was his biological brother, the closeness was only there somewhat. I think this is the first time we've had genuine emotion of like friendship and closeness between Dexter and another human being, even more so than Lila. I think he's finally got a friend, but then he's not got a friend. So it's that element kind of swayed it for me, and the way Miguel is flits between high-ranking official good guy, to there's a dark side to him. I think the way it's portrayed is really, really good. So yeah, for me, it was my favourite villain so far, so he goes top of the list.
So, moving on to our last rankings, and this is where we rank the seasons. Now, we've obviously only had 3 seasons so far, and just to recap, I had season 1 at number 9 out of 10, season 2 8 out of 10. Now, for me, I've actually put down season 3 8 out of 10. It is really, really, really good season. I really enjoyed it. I found myself actually binge watching quite a lot of the episodes, so I think I did the season 3 only in a few days. I found myself watching quite a lot of episodes back to back. I was really intrigued with the whole Miguel Prada, Dexter kind of dance, really. So like always, we can't have joint places though, so I do think season 3 I liked it better than season 2. I did. So I've put the order is season 1, season 3, season 2. So very, very strong opening 3 seasons for Dexter. Really, really good. No weak episodes, really. I really enjoyed it, Andy. Really enjoyed it. Looking forward to season 4. What about you, Andy? How did you rank this one?
So like you, I give season 3 8 out of 10, but I'd given season 1 and 2 both 9 out of 10. I've got 2 in first place, followed by 1, followed by 3. To say it's the weakest season so far, I think is not really doing it justice, because it's still a fantastic season. I think first time round, my thoughts would have been, when it aired years and years ago, I would have probably said 3 was my favourite season, because I feel like they got better and better and better over time. On second watching, as this was, a few things just dropped it down slightly for me. I think some of the comedic elements went a little bit too far. I think some of Dexter's mannerisms and choices made him, like you said earlier in the episode, not as likable. Throughout season 1 and 2, he's still the hero of the piece, even though he does things in a very dark and unorthodox way. This season, we saw some sides of Dexter that just made him not likable. So that just dropped it down a little bit for me, but still a fantastic series. Absolutely loved it. And from memory of what comes up in season 4, I am really, really looking forward to rewatching that soon. But for now, it's the end of this one. So thank you everyone for listening. It's been a marathon episode. We've talked a lot of stuff, a lot of Dexter, a lot of remakes, but hopefully you've enjoyed what we've had to say.
Yeah, hopefully. And remember, if you've got any questions, suggestions, feedback, do you agree with our remakes? Do you agree with our season 3 rankings and talking points? Do let us know on our social media channels, or you can reach out to us at theratingroom@gmail.com.
Yeah, check out our website, theratingroom.com, or our YouTube channel and our YouTube channel. Go to both at The Rating Room.
You can find us on all major social media sites by searching at The Rating Room. Make sure you subscribe to all our channels as well to stay up to date with the latest news and find out what episodes are coming up.
I can tell you what's coming up next week, and that's a look at a film that I've not actually seen before as we review the film Layer Cake.
The Rating Room. The Rating Room.